Chapter 484. Night fell. The banquet hall of White Dew Castle was illuminated by hundreds of candles. Mighty and majestic armored guards stood motionless around the hall with long spears in their hands. Graceful and beautiful young maids walked with light steps, placing plates of delicious food on the long dining table. The well-dressed duchess stood at the entrance of the banquet hall, greeting the guests with an impeccable smile. Although the Duke of St. Prospero had just died and it was inappropriate for White Dew Castle to hold such a big banquet, the Duchess insisted on it. Moreover, she also had a suitable excuse to welcome Prince Harrison and Princess Judy to White Dew Castle. As for the fact that the teacher of these two royal guests had just killed the Duke of St. Prospero, well, let's just pretend it didn't happen. Of course, many smart people also knew that the death of the Duke of St. Prospero might be a happy event for the Duchess. Only then could she truly become the mistress of White Dew Castle, and even the entire eastern region. In the banquet hall, the Duchess was already the focus of everyone's attention. One by one, the nobles of the eastern region came forward, either openly or secretly expressing their loyalty to her. The Duchess gracefully and skillfully dealt with them, but secretly, her mind was always paying attention to the entrance of the hall. Seeing that the important people she was waiting for didn't appear, the Duchess broke away from the overly enthusiastic crowd and asked the butler, "Where are the two princes? And Count Angeli, why isn't he here yet? I'll go take a look myself." Before the butler could take a few steps, he saw the captain of the White Dew Castle Guards, Knight Warren, striding over. The Duchess saw Knight Warren's dignified expression and slightly frowned. She hurriedly asked, "Knight Warren, what's wrong?" Knight Warren walked to the Duchess' side and reported in a low voice, "Madam, just now Count Angeli was assassinated in his room." The Duchess held her breath, trying hard not to lose her composure. But before she could ask more about the situation, she heard a voice shouting beside her, "What? Count Angeli was assassinated?" In fact, Knight Warren had deliberately lowered his voice. Logically speaking, only the Duchess should have heard him clearly. However, he did not expect that Count Nicole, who happened to be passing by, would hear him and even shout out loud. Now, it was as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire banquet. Instantly, there was complete silence. The Duchess glared fiercely at Count Nicole. She could not tell whether the exclamation was intentional or not, but she did not have the time to pursue the matter. She immediately stepped forward and whispered into Knight Warren's ear, "First, kill all the 100 guards that followed Count Angeli into the city. Second, lock down all the city gates and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. Third, gather the army and get ready. The bloody cavalry. I'm afraid they're going to go crazy." Hearing the last sentence, Knight Warren couldn't help but shudder as if he had foreseen a terrifying scene. However, he also knew that the situation was urgent and he couldn't afford to let his imagination run wild. He immediately nodded and strode away. At this time, the guests in the banquet hall finally reacted and immediately clamored. "Duchess, is it true that Count Angeli was killed? Duchess, who assassinated Count Angeli? Duchess, will White Dew City fall into the flames of war again?" Question after question shot at her like arrows, but the Duchess only smiled calmly and gestured with her hand. She said calmly, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Distinguished guests, I'm sorry to disturb everyone's mood. But please rest assured, no matter what happens, the House of St. Prospero has the ability to deal with it. Now, please enjoy the delicious food here. Let me go and understand the specific situation, then I'll explain it to you in detail." After saying these, the Duchess no longer cared about the questions in the hall and strode out. Outside the door, the smile on the Duchess' face instantly disappeared, and her expression changed from calm to anxious. Count Angeli was dead. Although she also wanted this terrible Count of the northern frontier to die, he must not die in White Dew Castle. Because if Count Angeli died here, no matter how the House of St. Prospero explained, the whole empire would think that they were the ones who assassinated Count Angeli. Emperor Reinhardt's order of war smoothly arrived in White Dew City, but Count Angeli was assassinated in White Dew City as a guest. How would the royal family punish the House of Saint Prospero? The reaction of the northern frontier after hearing this news would give the Duchess a headache. If the young Duke of the northern region was determined to avenge her husband at all costs, then the eastern region would definitely face an extremely terrible crisis. Now that the orcs were about to invade, the royal family and the church, in order to calm the anger of the northern frontier, would most likely join hands to pressure the eastern region. In this case, there must be someone with enough power to take responsibility for Count Angeli's death. The Duchess desperately realized that this person was very likely to be herself. Even if she did not plan to assassinate Count Angeli, for the sake of the overall situation, she, as the Archbishop of the Eastern region and the Duchess of Saint Prospero, would most likely be ruthlessly abandoned to appease the northern frontier. Thinking of this, the Duchess immediately realized that this was a trap. A carefully designed trap for her. The person who designed this trap obviously knew the current situation of the eastern region like the back of his hand. He immediately found the fatal weakness of the current order, and with just a light blow, the stable situation that the Duchess had worked hard to create was in danger of collapsing. The Duchess only felt a chill in her heart. But she quickly took a few deep breaths and forced herself to calm down. The enemy had already made his move, and the Duchess knew that she had no other choice but to take the attack. Now, what she wanted to know the most was who planned all this behind the scenes. Also, what other moves would they make after this? While thinking, the Duchess had already arrived at Colin's room. The room was already surrounded by the guards of the House of Saint Prospero, and even Prince Harrison and Princess Judy were blocked outside. "Duchess, why don't you let us in? What happened to teacher? Your Highnesses, please forgive the rudeness of these guards. However, the situation inside is a bit complicated. Let me first check it out, then I will explain it to you." After saying this, without waiting for Prince Harrison and Princess Judy to reply, the Duchess strode into the room. Then, she saw Colin lying in a pool of blood. His chest was torn apart, his heart was missing, and the floor was covered in blood. The Duchess did not need to go forward to check to know that this person was completely hopeless. Chapter 485. Did you see the person's face clearly? No, Duchess. He was too fast, I could only see a blur. Then you didn't see anything clearly? The last thing I saw was that person stopping in front of Count Angeli's corpse. From the back, it should be a middle-aged man about 1.9 meters tall. Blonde hair, and the scabbard of the knight's sword at his waist. I think it was purple. The Duchess listened to the guards rambling for a long time, but she didn't get any useful information. Her expression started to become impatient. The guard obviously noticed this and hurriedly racked his brains. Then, he added with some uncertainty, "That's not right." He then added, "Duchess, I think I saw that person rushing out of Prince Harrison's residence, are you sure?" The Duchess' expression changed, and she hurriedly asked. "It should be." The guard became hesitant again. The Duchess was a little disappointed, but she still walked out. She found Prince Harrison, who was waiting anxiously outside, and asked, "Your Highness Harrison, a guard said that he saw the murderer rushing out from your residence. Did you notice anyone suspicious?" Prince Harrison only hesitated for a moment, and then immediately said, "Duchess, Prince Rhy appeared in my room, and then he rushed out for no reason. Then, I heard that teacher was attacked by an assassin." "Duchess, teacher, he couldn't have been killed, right? Prince Rhy." The Duchess was shocked by this name. This paladin of the San Lorenzo family actually appeared in White Dew City, and even killed Count Angeli. This made the Duchess a little confused for a moment. It must be known that although Prince Rhy was born into the royal San Lorenzo family, he actually sided with the church. So, why would he come to White Dew Castle to kill someone for no reason? Furthermore, Prince Rhy didn't have any grudges with Count Angeli. Seeing the Duchess standing there in a daze, Prince Harrison asked again, "Duchess, what happened to teacher?" The Duchess knew that this matter couldn't be hidden, so she sighed and said, "Count Angeli has already been killed by an assassin. No, that's impossible. How could teacher die so easily? He's a grade 6 knight." Prince Harrison kept shaking his head. He couldn't accept this result at all. The teacher who had created miraculous results time and time again had died just like that. Princess Judy also burst into tears. She yelled and tried to run into the room, but was stopped by the guards. After hearing Prince Harrison's words, the Duchess realized something. Indeed, Colin Angeli was a rank 6 knight. Apart from a paladin like Prince Lacy, who else could kill him so easily? But she still couldn't figure out Prince Leahy's motive. At this moment, Knight Warren came to the Duchess' side again and reported softly, "Madam, it's my fault. I failed to stop the northern frontier guards who followed Count Angeli into the city. They escaped." "What?" The Duchess raised her eyebrows and said angrily, "You can't even stop those few people." Knight Warren felt aggrieved and said in a muffled voice, "Madam, although there aren't many of them, all of them are professionals. There are even 2 sixth-order warriors among them. We can't stop them at all." 2 sixth-order warriors. The Duchess' voice changed. She knew that even the House of St. Prospero didn't have 2 sixth-order warriors. Was the Angeli family so extravagant that they had sixth-order warriors as guards? And 2 of them. However, the worst news was yet to come. Knight Warren continued to report, "Also, when we chased the northern frontier guards to the north gate, we found that the gate was open. I suspect that someone in the city deliberately opened the gate for them." The Duchess felt a chill in her heart and immediately asked, which family's army was originally stationed at the north gate? It was the Nickel family's army. Count Nickel. The Duchess suddenly thought of the previous banquet, when Count Nickel shouted about the assassination of Count Angeli. Originally, she thought that Count Nickel just couldn't help but exclaim after hearing such shocking news, but now it seemed that the old man did it on purpose. At that time, Count Nickel might not have heard Knight Warren's report at all, but he already knew that Count Angeli would be assassinated. This Count Nickel was an accomplice in this assassination. Where is Count Nickel? The Duchess gritted her teeth and asked. Knight Warren also realized something and immediately said, "I'll go find him now." The Duchess stopped Knight Warren and ordered with a gloomy face, "Don't waste time. If Count Nickel really betrayed the House of St. Prospero, he should have escaped from White Duke Castle by now. Go immediately mobilize the Pegasus Legion and control the 4 gates. Don't let the Blood Cavalry enter the city." "Yes." In the banquet hall, a group of nobles was still talking about the assassination of Count Angeli. However, some people had already left in advance when no one was paying attention. For example, Count Nickel, and Beatrice. She didn't go to the place where Colin was assassinated, but went straight to Marquis Vincent's room. "Madame Beatrice. Is the Marquis awake?" "Not yet. You can leave first." "Yes." Since the Marquis was still in the banquet hall, after the maids left, only Marquis Vincent and Beatrice were left in the room. "Aunt, what's wrong?" Marquis Vincent opened his eyes and asked in confusion. "Colin is dead," Beatrice said. "Really?" Marquis Vincent sat up from the bed in surprise. "Aunt, you've succeeded? What about Mother? Did you kill her too?" Beatrice shook her head and said, "No, I didn't have time to do anything. Colin Angeli was killed by someone else." Marquis Vincent was stunned for a moment and asked after a while, "Who killed him?" "I don't know." "Then, have you been to the scene?" "Not yet. What's wrong?" Marquis Vincent's face changed greatly. He immediately grabbed Beatrice's arm and said in a hurry, "No, you must cut off his head. You must cut off his head." Beatrice frowned and asked in confusion, "Why do you have to cut off his head?" "Because, if you don't cut off his head, he will come to you." A drifting voice suddenly came from outside the window. Marquis Vincent suddenly froze, as if he was petrified, but his face showed an extremely frightened expression. Chapter 486. Duchess, you should at least let us go in and collect my teacher's body. Prince Harrison said in a deep voice. He finally showed the dignity of the first heir of the royal family. Duchess hesitated for a second and nodded. Your Highnesses, I understand your feelings. Of course, I can let you go in and say goodbye to Count Angeli. However, since the murderer of Count Angeli hasn't been found yet, please don't touch his body for the time being. Duchess waved her hand to the guards after she finished. Prince Harrison immediately held his weeping sister's hand and strode in. However, after entering the room, Prince Harrison only saw the blood on the floor. His teacher's body was nowhere to be found. In his confusion, Prince Harrison walked around the room and searched every nook and cranny, but he still couldn't find Colin's body. Brother, where is my teacher? Princess Judy was also confused. She even forgot to continue crying. I don't know. Prince Harrison frowned and walked out of the room. Where is my teacher's body? Gone. The guard at the door was also confused. However, when he entered the room, he was shocked to find that the body was indeed gone. The guard quickly went to inform Duchess. Duchess was also panicked. She thought that someone had stolen the body. Although she couldn't understand why, she still ordered the guards to search the room. The assassination of Count Angeli was strange from the beginning to the end. The Duchess couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. However, she didn't have the time to think about the secrets hidden in Count Angeli's death, because a messenger hurriedly ran to report to her. Duchess, Knight Warren asked me to inform you that the Nickel family has betrayed us. At this time, they have occupied the North Gate and are attacking the approaching Skyhorse Legion. Duchess only felt that her hands and feet were cold and her heart was trembling. The worst situation had happened. She calmed herself down and asked, what about the Blood Cavalry? Have they entered the city? Not yet. Not yet? Duchess was happy, but she still couldn't believe it. Yes. The Blood Cavalry didn't do anything in the camp outside the city. It seems that they didn't receive the news of Count Angeli's death. The Duchess was a little bewildered. Just now, Knight Warren clearly said that he didn't stop the group of guards that Colin Angeli brought into the city, so those guards who escaped would definitely inform the Blood Cavalry that Earl Angeli was assassinated. Why didn't the Bloody Cavalry take any action now? What's more, Count Nicole led his army to occupy the North Gate. It was obvious that he wanted to let the Bloody Cavalry, who would definitely go crazy because of the death of Colin Angelo, enter the city and launch a bloody revenge against the House of St. Prospero. But why didn't things go according to the script? The Duchess didn't know what went wrong with the enemy's plan, but she immediately realized that this was the perfect opportunity for her. As long as they took back the North City Gate and blocked the Bloody Cavalry outside the city, the situation of the White Dew City would not be irreversible. Thinking of this, the Duchess no longer hesitated and immediately strode out. But seeing this, Prince Harrison hurriedly shouted, Duchess, why are you leaving just like that? Where was teacher's body? What about the murderer of the teacher? The Duchess didn't care about a dead person at this time. She didn't stop walking and said perfunctorily, Your Highness Harrison, of course I won't leave Earl Angeli alone. I'm going to deploy a more detailed search. So, please wait here patiently, I'll inform you as soon as I have any progress. After that, the Duchess left in a hurry. Princess Judy pitifully pulled Prince Harrison's arm and asked while sobbing, Brother, is teacher really dead? Prince Harrison looked at the back of the Duchess, but slowly shook his head and said, How could teacher die so easily? Really? Princess Judy smiled through her tears and asked in surprise. Prince Harrison tightly pursed his lips and said in a serious voice, Anyway, I won't believe it until I see teacher's body with my own eyes. Princess Judy also nodded, Well, I don't believe that teacher is dead either. You're really not dead. Beatrice looked at Colin, who climbed in through the window with a shocked face. How could I die so easily? Colin smiled as he slowly approached. The terrifying bloody hole in his chest hadn't completely healed, and she could even see the crushed heart hanging there like a deflated balloon. But Colin acted as if nothing had happened. As he walked, he pointed at his own head and said meaningfully, "That's right. Didn't Marquis Vincent tell you? If you want to kill me, you have to cut off my head." Beatrice's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she saw. She muttered as she retreated. "Devil. You're a devil, devil." The corner of Colin's mouth rose as he continued to approach Beatrice. He said, "Why can't I be an oracle?" "Oracle?" Beatrice stopped retreating and seemed to understand something. "Are you a god's chosen one?" Without waiting for Colin to answer, Beatrice seemed to have realized something and immediately said, "That's right, you must be a chosen. Otherwise, how could a small family like Angeli have such a talented person like you? How could you have such an almost immortal ability? Lord Chosen, what kind of mission did you bring to this world? I wonder if I have the honor of being able to contribute even the tiniest bit to your grand plan." With that, the expression on Beatrice's face became extremely pious. She slowly crawled in front of Colin and tried to kiss his toes. Colin raised his eyebrows. Obviously, he didn't expect this woman to change so quickly. Just as he was about to deceive her, his expression suddenly froze. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk Beatrice, who was originally crawling on the ground, suddenly stood up. The silver dagger in her right hand was like a viper coming out of its hole, stabbing toward Colin's neck. However, the dagger was caught by a large hand midway. "Humph. You overestimate yourself." Colin sneered. Beatrice's expression didn't change. Her eyes were full of determination, and there was no longer any reverence and piety from before. She quickly kicked up her right leg, and at the same time, her left hand stabbed toward the bloody hole in Colin's chest. However, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Even if Colin was seriously injured at this moment, although the damage to his heart was not fatal, it still made him weak. Even so, with the strength of a fourth-grade knight, it was still difficult for Beatrice to threaten Colin. "Ka! Ka!" Colin closed his legs and clamped Beatrice's insidious leg. At the same time, his right hand grabbed her wrist, and he used so much strength that he almost crushed Beatrice's wrist bones. The distance between the two was very close, and their posture was quite ambiguous, but in fact, they were engaged in an extremely dangerous life and death battle. Beatrice was indeed a fierce woman. Even if her hands and feet were restrained, she still refused to give up. She swung her head and fiercely hit Colin's nose. Holy light surged on Colin's face, and the dense golden lines quickly formed a mask-like shield. Dong! This hit, Colin was safe and sound, but Beatrice's face was covered with blood and she was dizzy. Colin sneered and bit Beatrice's slender neck without hesitation. Chapter 487. Looking at his aunt and Colin hugging each other in an ambiguous posture, Marquis Vincent could only feel a bone-deep fear. In fact, Marquis Vincent found himself unable to control his body after hearing Colin's voice. When Beatrice and Colin were fighting for their lives, Marquis Vincent wanted to help, but he couldn't move at all. Boundless fear shrouded him. This was a reaction that came from the depths of his bloodline, as if he had met his natural enemy. He couldn't overcome it with willpower. In just a short while, Marquis Vincent was completely drenched, as if he had just been fished out of the water. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Colin threw Beatrice to the ground without any pity and turned to look at Marquis Vincent with a dazzling smile. However, this smile was the most terrifying thing in the world in Marquis Vincent's eyes. "Marquis Vincent, do you really want my head that badly?" You. Marquis Vincent tried his best to open his mouth, but he couldn't form a complete sentence. Colin looked at all of this and was a little surprised at the terrifying suppression he had over his blood kin. This suppression seemed to have surpassed the difference in strength between the two. One had to know that even if Marquis Vincent wasn't as strong as him, he shouldn't be acting so unbearably. It seemed that even if his bloodline was stronger than him, he wouldn't be able to resist him under the suppression of his bloodline. Unfortunately, being unable to resist physically didn't mean that he would be mentally submissive. Marquis Vincent had indeed betrayed him. Although Colin was mentally prepared for this, he still felt disappointed and angry. This also meant that all of his bloodline could betray him. Of course, this was actually very reasonable. After all, bloodline descendants had self-awareness. Betrayal was almost an inevitable byproduct of self-awareness. However, Colin wasn't too worried. Marquis Vincent's betrayal was mainly due to the great conflict of interest between the two of them. The other bloodline descendants, such as Queen Aisha, were completely bound to Colin's interests, not to mention that she had already given birth to a daughter for Colin. Under such circumstances, Queen Aisha wouldn't betray Colin even if she wasn't tied down by the vampires. Knight Siar was willing to become Colin's blood subordinate at the beginning, and now the bloody cavalry had been completely controlled by Colin, so Knight Siar, whose life value was bound to the bloody cavalry, would naturally not betray them. Vala probably wouldn't either. After all, it was Colin who helped him take back the Oman family's title, and Colin's sister was also married to him. She wouldn't betray him unless something unexpected happened. Countess Schultz, on the other hand, didn't have much of a conflict of interest with Colin, and Colin had caused her to lose her husband. It was impossible for her not to resent Colin at all. Although she was very obedient and gentle to Colin when they were in Swan Castle, he was afraid that she was just trying to please him. He didn't know what she was thinking in the dark. Thinking of this, Colin also reminded himself, don't blindly trust the blood descendants. They weren't like those blood slaves who didn't have self-awareness, and could completely obey Colin's will. While Colin was deep in thought, Marquis Vincent felt as if a year had passed. He kept making meaningless growls, as if he had a lot to say to Colin. Colin came back to his senses and slightly restrained his aura. Marquis Vincent finally caught his breath. He climbed down from the bed on all fours and crawled in front of Colin. His forehead was firmly pressed against Colin's feet as he said, "Lord blessed. Please forgive my foolish actions from before. As long as you are willing to give me another chance, I will definitely follow your orders without any hesitation." Colin smiled in a noncommittal manner and asked, "Yes. Tell me, what's your plan?" Marquis Vincent hurriedly explained his and Beatrice's plan in full detail. Of course, he unsurprisingly pushed all the responsibility to Beatrice, and he himself was only forced to cooperate. Colin rubbed his chin and asked doubtfully, "So, you didn't contact Mr. Chi?" "Mr. Chi?" Marquis Vincent was stunned. "Are you talking about the surviving member of the Saint Thean family? But wasn't he killed by Prince Rhy long ago?" Colin saw that Marquis Vincent's doubts didn't seem to be fake and immediately understood. There was probably another faction in the city. Seeing that Colin was deep in thought again, Marquis Vincent carefully raised his head and explained softly, "My lord, the reason why I pretended to be unconscious wasn't because I didn't want to follow your orders. It was because White Dew City was under my mother's control, and she actually wanted to kill me. Helpless, I had no choice but to pretend to be dead." "Is that so?" Colin thought for a moment and understood the Duchess' motive for wanting to kill her son. It seemed like she really was a sinister woman who would do anything to achieve her goals. "So, you had the time to urge Beatrice to chop off my head, but you didn't have the ability to contact me and tell me about the situation in White Dew City, right?" Faced with Colin's questioning, Marquis Vincent was so frightened that he prostrated himself on the ground again and said in an incomparably self-reproachful tone, "My lord, I also realized that my actions were extremely stupid and could even be called blasphemy. As long as you are willing to forgive my sins, I will become your most loyal servant and control the entire eastern region for you." "Loyalty?" Colin sneered and said, This thing is like a young girl's chastity. Once lost, it can never be found again. After saying this, without waiting for Marquis Vincent's explanation, Colin's palm quickly reached out and pressed on Marquis Vincent's head like lightning. Then, Marquis Vincent was lifted up by Colin as if he was a defenseless doll. When the two were at eye level, Colin quietly stared into Marquis Vincent's terrified eyes and said indifferently, "Do you know? You will only die after your head is chopped off. This is actually a characteristic of blood thralls. As for me, I don't know if I will die after my head is chopped off. Also, will a bloodline die? But since you are so curious, I will experiment on you." After saying this, Colin forcefully twisted his hand. Crack! Marquis Vincent's head was twisted off. Plop! Marquis Vincent's headless body softly fell to the ground and twitched a few times before it stopped moving. Colin observed for a while and was indeed unable to sense the other party's vital signs. So, a bloodline will also die without a head. Colin muttered to himself. It seemed that he would be the same as well. Casually throwing away Marquis Vincent's head, Colin walked to the window and looked out. Tonight, White Dew City was destined to not be peaceful. Shouts, screams, and flames all indicated that this would be a night of bloodshed. However, this had little to do with Colin. Although someone had tried to drag the blood cavalry into the water before, how could Colin be fooled? Those blood thralls who escaped did not bring back the news of his assassination, but his order to prohibit the blood cavalry from entering the city. In short, he was ready to watch a good show tonight. Whoosh! Colin spread his wings and rushed into the dark night. Just after he left, Beatrice, who was lying on the ground, slowly opened her eyes. But her eyes had completely lost their original quickness and brilliance, becoming dull and even dead. Chapter 488. The area near the north gate of White Dew City had become a meat mill. Countless soldiers of the Sky Horse Legion rushed up one after another, trying to regain control of the north gate. However, the army of the Nickel family firmly occupied the gate tower and repelled the attacks of the Sky Horse Legion again and again. Although the Sky Horse Legion was in the city at this time, to recapture the north gate tower was no less than a siege battle. It was ironic. Under such circumstances, the Sky Horse Legion would leave behind countless corpses for every step they took. A dense rain of arrows continued to fall from the top of the city, shooting down the soldiers of the Sky Horse Legion one by one. If it were not for the military judge at the back, the rebuilt Sky Horse Legion would have been defeated and fled. However, the army of the Nickel family on the opposite side was not having a good time either. They were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and this battle was inexplicable. Many soldiers did not know why they were fighting with the Sky Horse Legion, and they were all in a trance. Therefore, the two sides were like chickens pecking at each other. For a while, they were evenly matched, and it was hard to tell who was worse. On the gate tower, the Earl of Avon looked at the direction of the camp of the blood cavalry outside the city, and he became more and more anxious. What's going on? Didn't the guards of the northern frontier just escape? Why is the blood cavalry not moving? Earl Nickel opened his mouth, but he did not know how to answer this question. He had a bad feeling in his heart, but he also knew that he had no way out now. He could only follow the Earl of Avon to the end. The Earl of Avon stared at the darkness in the distance, as if he wanted to see the situation in the camp of the blood cavalry through the darkness. However, it was obviously in vain. The dark night shrouded everything in an unknown fog. The Earl of Avon was doomed to rely on guessing to determine the possible movements of the blood cavalry. After a long silence, the Earl of Avon's expression changed and he suddenly said, "Do you think we have overestimated the status of Colin Angeli in the blood cavalry?" Earl Nickel was stunned and said, "You mean, the blood cavalry does not care about the life and death of Colin Angeli?" "Yes." The Earl of Avon's eyes were shining as if he had seen through everything. "Think about it carefully. Colin Angeli has only taken over the bloody cavalry for more than a year. In such a short time, no matter how powerful he is, it is impossible for him to completely remove the brand left by Marquis Garcia. We've always mistakenly thought that Colin Angeli was the soul of this army, but what if he's just an ostensible commander, and the real commander is someone else? Count Nickel rubbed his chin and nodded in agreement. That is indeed a possibility. After all, the Angeli family was just a small baron, and they could not afford to raise a cavalry. Colin Angeli knew nothing about cavalry before he met Marquis Garcia. Then, how could he become a genius cavalry commander after following Marquis Garcia to the Sky Icefield? So, it is very likely that he is not the commander of the bloody cavalry all the time. Not only is he not the commander, but the bloody cavalry does not really belong to Colin Angeli. The Earl of Avon added, with excitement in his words, Marquis Garcia or the House of St. Hilda is the real owner of this cavalry. So, when the news of Colin Angeli's death spread out, the bloody cavalry did not come to the city to avenge him as we expected. This undoubtedly shows that the bloody cavalry is not really loyal to Colin Angeli. So, when he died, the bloody cavalry did not go crazy, but wanted to retreat. Then what should we do? Earl Nickel frowned and did not know what to do. If the bloody cavalry does not enter the city, the army of the Nickel family alone cannot stop the Sky Horse troop. The Earl of Avon's eyes flashed with dangerous light and said coldly, if the bloody cavalry does not enter the city, we will lure them in. How? Of course, we will create more chaos. More chaos? Yes. The Earl of Avon's face became a little ferocious. The bloody cavalry is not moving now, which means that they are also hesitating. Even if they are not really loyal to Colin Angeli, he is the Earl of the Empire, the guardian of the northern frontier, and the husband of the Duke of St. Hilda. His identity is very noble. He died in the White Dew City. If the bloody cavalry just left, they would not be able to face the accountability of the Duke of St. Hilda. So, they really want to enter the city, but they are afraid that it will be another trap like last time. Then, we will make the city really chaotic, so that the bloody cavalry will completely dispel their doubts and rush in. Earl Nickel opened his eyes wide and reminded hesitantly, Earl of Avon, don't you worry that the situation will be completely out of control. So what? The Earl of Avon replied without hesitation, I will not hesitate to turn the White Dew City into ruins. Earl Nickel looked at the Earl of Avon in horror, as if he had a new understanding of the second son of the Duke of the Eastern region. The Earl of Avon smiled faintly and said indifferently, why are you so excited? It is not the first time that the White Dew City has been turned into ruins. Furthermore, after the previous destruction, the rebuilt White Dew City had become even bigger and more prosperous. Presumably, the next time it was rebuilt, it would only be better. Just like a phoenix reborn in fire, destruction is to welcome a new life. Now the Eastern region needs such a new life. Earl Nickel was silent for a long time, and his eyes finally became firm, as if he had made up his mind. He asked, Earl of Avon, how do you plan to make the White Dew City really chaotic? I am afraid that the army of the Nickel family alone is not enough, right? The Earl of Avon took a deep breath, looked at the castle standing in the center of the White Dew City, and said in a deep voice, I want to go to the White Dew Castle myself. Earl Nickel's expression changed, and he advised, Earl of Avon, it is not a good idea for you to go back to the White Dew Castle at this time. I have to go. The Earl of Avon's eyes were firm, you also know that the Nickel family alone cannot make the whole White Dew City chaotic. I have to win the support of more lords of the Eastern region. As long as their army in the city is on our side, it is possible to suppress the Pegasus Legion. So I have to go. You don't have to worry about me. At this time, Mother is in a terrible state because of Colin Angelo's death, she may not have the time to take care of me. Earl Nickel reminded him again. Earl of Avon, even if the Duchess does not have time to take care of you, at this time, if you enter the White Dew Castle alone, how confident are you that you can persuade the lords to follow you? The Earl of Avon smiled confidently. I don't have much confidence, but what if the two highnesses are involved? The two highnesses? Earl Nicholl's eyes lit up. You mean Prince Harrison and Princess Judy? Yes. Colin Angelo was their teacher. As long as I can see them, it is not difficult to make them blame the mistress of the White Dew Castle for their teacher's death. What's more, the royal family has always been on the opposite side of the church. If I promise to draw a clear line between the eastern region and the church, then do you think the two highnesses will help me deal with Mother? With the support of Prince Harrison and Princess Judy, if I stand out and persuade the lords of the eastern region, I have a 70% to 80% chance of success. Earl Nicholl nodded, but his face was still worried. It does make sense, but, the risk is great. What is there without risk? The Earl of Avon said firmly, if I miss this opportunity, I will never be the Duke of the Eastern region. Earl Nicholl gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, good. I will arrange for someone to escort you away. Chapter 489. White Dew Castle, Banquet Hall. Melodious music, delicious food, beautiful maids. None of these could calm the restless hearts of the guests. The news of Earl Angeli's death had already made people anxious. Later, they heard the sound of fighting in the city, which made them even more anxious. They thought that the blood cavalry was coming to the city to avenge Earl Angeli. They were so scared that they were ready to leave. The steward of the house of Saint Prospero tried to persuade them to stay, but it was useless. These nobles of the eastern region didn't want to stay in White Dew Castle and wait for the blood cavalry to come in and be buried with the house of Saint Prospero, so they were determined to leave. However, when they hurried to the gate of White Dew Castle, they found that the gate was tightly closed, and a group of heavily armed guards blocked the gate. The guests suddenly clamored and asked to open the gate to let them leave. But the guards didn't move at all. It seemed that they had received a clear order to prohibit them from leaving. Who let you block the gate? Is the house of Saint Prospero going to kill all the nobles of the eastern region? Where is the Duchess? We want to see her. I'm here. Seeing that the situation was in danger of getting out of control, the Duchess finally came out. The chaotic scene suddenly became quiet. A nobleman of the eastern region immediately stood up and asked, Duchess, why do you forbid us to leave White Dew Castle? The Duchess didn't answer this question, but asked, why are you in such a hurry to leave? This kind of question seemed to irritate the nobles, and suddenly someone shouted, Duchess, why do you ask? The house of Saint Prospero didn't have the ability to protect the safety of the guests in White Dew Castle, which led to the assassination of Count Angeli. Now the blood cavalry is going to avenge Count Angeli. Do we still want to stay here and wait for death? The blood cavalry didn't enter the city. The Duchess said lightly. This sentence made the nobles of the eastern region stunned, but soon, doubts appeared on their faces. Apparently they thought that the Duchess was deliberately deceiving them. Duchess, you said that the blood cavalry didn't enter the city, then what's the fierce fighting outside? That's because Count Nicole betrayed the eastern region. He's fighting with the Sky Horse Legion. It has nothing to do with the bloody cavalry. Count Nicole. Betrayal? The nobles of the eastern region suddenly whispered to each other, obviously not expecting such a situation. The Duchess took the opportunity to continue, that's right. You don't need to worry about the blood cavalry. Although the news of Count Angeli's death has been spread out, the blood cavalry's camp is still quiet. Obviously, the generals of the bloody cavalry were sensible people, and they would not act irrationally under impulse. Some people wanted to use the death of Count Angeli to sow discord between the St. Pros family and the blood cavalry, and even the relationship between the St. Pros family and the blood cavalry. Their intentions were extremely sinister, but not everyone would be fooled. We, the House of Saint Prospero, are responsible for Count Angeli's death, and will do everything we can to make it up to him. However, the orcs are invading, and we need to work together. We can't fight among ourselves anymore. I believe that the bloody cavalry will also understand this point. So, your worries are unnecessary. The riot in the White Dew City was provoked by the Nickel family, and the situation is under the control of the Skyhorse Legion. You don't need to be so nervous. After these words, the expressions of the guests were obviously relaxed. They had all witnessed the terrible fighting power of the Blood Cavalry, and they had already been traumatized. However, if the Blood Cavalry did not attack the city, they would not be so scared. The rebellion of the Nickel family. It was not easy to calm down. However, there was also a hostage who asked, "Duchess, since the Skyhorse Legion can control the situation in the city, why are you so nervous to close the White Dew Castle and prohibit people from entering and leaving?" The Duchess glanced at the noble who spoke, and her face became gloomy. She said coldly, "Of course, to prevent the murderer of Count Angeli from leaving the White Dew Castle." This was a dignified reason. The guests did not know that Colin was already a 6th grade knight, or they would definitely shout that they were wronged. To be able to assassinate a 6th grade knight, one should at least have the strength of a 5th grade knight, or they would not be able to get close to him. However, 5th grade knights were not cabbages, and there were only a few of them here. After the crowd quieted down, the Duchess opened her mouth again. "Next, I will personally ask you about your whereabouts tonight. If I offend you, please forgive me. I believe that you all want to find the murderer of Count Angeli as soon as possible." Seeing that no one objected, the Duchess was about to start the questioning, but she saw a guard running to her in a hurry, and he could not hide the panic on his face. The Duchess could not help but feel angry in her heart. There were too many unexpected situations tonight, and she was already in a terrible situation. She did not want to see any more accidents. But unfortunately, the accidents still came. The guard looked at the Duchess's fierce eyes, walked to her, and reported in a low voice, "Madam, Marquis Vincent, he, unfortunately passed away." Hearing this, the Duchess was relieved. Marquis Vincent's death was within her expectation. No, it was within her plan. Of course, on the surface, she immediately put on a grief-stricken face, and said to the crowd with sobs, "Everyone. I'm really sorry. Vincent did not make it. He just passed away from his injuries." After hearing this, the guests were stunned for a moment, but they also quickly comforted her. But the guard on the side was dumbfounded. He hesitated for a moment, but still reminded her in a low voice, "Madam, I'm afraid the Marquis did not pass away from his injuries, but was just killed by someone." The Duchess's pupils shrank, and she coldly stared at the guard, and scolded, "Do you know what you are saying?" The guard wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and nodded, "Madam, I dare not speak nonsense," but the Marquis' head was twisted off. The Duchess's expression changed, and she immediately walked to Marquis Vincent's room. The guests were left in a daze, and they looked at each other. The Duchess walked to Marquis Vincent's room with a gloomy face, and as expected, she saw her son's decapitated corpse. Although she wanted Marquis Vincent to die, she did not want him to die in such a way. What happened at that time? The Duchess's voice was as cold as ice. The guard trembled as he replied, "Madam, at that time, the guards outside the house had already been killed. When the patrols in the castle found that something was wrong and pushed the door open, they saw that the Marquis had already been killed." "Oh, right, Madame Beatrice was also in the room at that time, and she was also killed." Only then did the Duchess notice Beatrice's existence, and a pleased sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth, but it quickly disappeared. She slowly walked to Marquis Vincent's corpse, ready to check the situation. But just as the Duchess squatted down, she suddenly felt a strong sense of danger behind her. She suddenly turned around and saw Beatrice, who should have been dead, pouncing on her. The dagger in her hand shone with a cold light. Chapter 490. Knight Andy felt that his authority had been offended. Of course, to be more precise, it should be the authority of His Majesty Reinhardt. But in his opinion, since he came to White Dew City with His Majesty Reinhardt's war order, there should be no more internal strife. Instead, he should immediately start preparing to send troops to support the western region. However, the sound of fighting still rang out in White Dew City. It was as if His Majesty Reinhardt's war order was just a piece of waste paper. Your Highness Harrison, it's time for you to stand up and show the Eastern region the majesty of the royal family. Otherwise, I don't know how this farce will end. Knight Andy stood in front of Prince Harrison and encouraged him. Prince Harrison was a little hesitant. After a moment of silence, he said, "Cousin Andy, you are the messenger sent by Father to the Eastern region. In this situation, shouldn't you go and show the majesty of the royal family?" Knight Andy suddenly choked. In fact, he had just tried to show the majesty of the royal family to the Eastern region people, but unfortunately, the Eastern region people didn't take him seriously. On the surface, they kept saying that they would exercise restraint and would never violate His Majesty Reinhardt's war order. But in fact, the Eastern region people were fighting fiercely again. Therefore, Knight Andy had no choice but to come to Prince Harrison for help. "Your Highness Harrison, after all, I am not a direct descendant of the San Lorenzo family. Those hateful Eastern region people don't take me seriously. But you are different. You are the eldest son of His Majesty, the first heir to the throne of the empire. As long as you show up, the Eastern region people won't dare to mess around." Seeing that Prince Harrison was still hesitating, Knight Andy said, "Your Highness, don't you want to find out the truth about the assassination of your teacher, Count Angeli?" This time, Prince Harrison was finally moved. He asked, "Cousin Andy, what do you think I should do?" Seeing this, Knight Andy was finally relieved. At the same time, he had a better understanding of Count Angeli's position in Prince Harrison's heart. Therefore, he couldn't help but think that if Count Angeli hadn't been assassinated, with Prince Harrison's respect and trust, his future would be limitless. What a pity. Getting rid of these useless thoughts, Knight Andy quickly suggested. "Your Highness Harrison, I believe that the current chaos in White Dew City is due to the lack of a powerful leader. After the death of the Duke of St. Prospero, although the Duchess became the mistress of the city on the surface, she was obviously unable to control the situation, and, she probably had ulterior motives. After all, the Duchess was the Archbishop of the Eastern region. She was hostile to the royal family. Maybe she was the one behind all this. She wanted to deliberately resist His Majesty's war order. Therefore, we must find a new master of the Eastern region who can replace the Duchess, and use him to stabilize the current situation, unify the forces of the Eastern region, and respond to His Majesty's war order." Prince Harrison nodded and asked, "Who do you think is more suitable?" If Marquis Vincent is safe and sound, he would naturally be the first choice. But now that he is bedridden with serious injuries, I don't know if he can make it. So, it can't be him. As for the other son and daughter of the Duke of St. Prospero, they were not in White Dew Castle, so they were not considered. Among the remaining St. Prospero, I think Knight Ivan is the most suitable. Because he is the younger brother of Governor Imosen, he has good prestige and connections in the House of St. Prospero, and he is mature and prudent. He also has a good impression of the royal family. Wait. Prince Harrison interrupted, "The right of succession to the Duke of the Eastern region is not Knight Ivan's turn, right?" Knight Andy smiled and explained, "Your Highness, we are not helping the Duke of the Eastern region choose a successor. We only need a temporary leader who can stabilize the current situation. As for the new Duke of the Eastern region, if he wants to be officially conferred by His Majesty, I am afraid he will have to wait until the invasion of the orcs is repelled." Prince Harrison pondered for a while and finally nodded, "Well, do you know where Knight Ivan is? I want to see him first." Knight Andy looked happy and hurriedly said, "I just met him on the road. I will help you see him." After that, he hurriedly left. After a while, Knight Andy and Knight Ivan came together. Prince Harrison immediately narrowed his eyes. Although he was young and immature, he was not stupid. Moreover, he had grown up in the royal family and had seen many politicians with different thoughts. He had also been influenced by Colin's many conspiracies and machinations. How could he not understand by now? Knight Andy and Knight Ivan had already colluded. Of course, Prince Harrison wasn't angry. He remembered his mother once said, "Don't expect the people below to have no ulterior motives. What you need to do is to use their ulterior motives and make them serve your purpose. Your Royal Highness, Prince Harrison. Please allow me to express my sincerest apologies on behalf of the House of St. Prospero. The current situation in White Dew City. Sigh. It's really terrible." Prince Harrison straightened his back, imitated his father, and said in a deep voice, "That's why we need a strong leader to stand up, stabilize the people, and quell the unrest." Knight Ivan perked up and instantly understood Prince Harrison's meaning. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Your Highness, you are absolutely right. If you don't mind my stupidity, I'm willing to do my best to help you stabilize the current situation." Prince Harrison did not immediately nod. Instead, he asked, "Knight Ivan, are you confident?" "Your Highness, I'll let you know that among the 5 commanders of the Pegasus Legion, one of them is the son-in-law of my brother, Governor Amasan, and the other one is my good-for-nothing son." Knight Ivan said in a proud tone, but then he immediately showed a humble smile and said, "Your Highness, I'll let you know. As for the other 3 commanders, as long as your Highness makes an appearance, I believe you will be able to make them understand what the overall situation is." Prince Harrison took a deep look at Knight Ivan, then nodded and said, "Yes. All right, if you can stabilize the situation in White Dew City and help me find the murderer of Count Angeli, I can agree on behalf of my father to let you temporarily take over the authority of the Eastern region." Knight Ivan suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and solemnly knelt down on one knee. "Thank you for your trust in me, Your Highness." Then, Knight Ivan immediately said, "Your Highness Harrison, our top priority is to control the situation in White Dew Castle first. And the key figure is the captain of the guards of White Dew Castle, Knight Warren. This person is the guardian knight of the Duchess and is also a fanatic of the Church. I'm afraid it will be more troublesome. I suggest you meet with him first. If this person is stubborn, then we must not be soft-hearted." Looking at the murderous Knight Ivan, Prince Harrison's heart trembled. Only then did he realize that he was about to participate in a bloody seizure of power, and there was no room for mercy or hesitation. He took a deep breath and was about to ask in detail when he saw a guard running over in a panic and reporting to Knight Ivan, "Sir Ivan, it's bad. Madame Beatrice went crazy and killed Marquis Vincent and the Duchess." Knight Ivan was stunned at first, but instead of being shocked, he was overjoyed and immediately said to Prince Harrison, "Your Highness, this is a heaven-sent opportunity." Prince Harrison's entire body quivered, and after coming to his senses, he immediately said, "That's right. Good. Then let's do it." Chapter 491. The news of the Duchess' death swept through White Dew Castle like a whirlwind. Everywhere it went, the crowd was shocked and panicked, not knowing what to do. Especially the nobles of the eastern region gathered at the gate of White Dew Castle. They were shocked and began to worry about their own safety. First, Count Angeli was assassinated, then Marquis Vincent was killed, and now even the Duchess was not spared. In their eyes, White Dew Castle had become an extremely dangerous place, and they could no longer suppress their desire to escape. "Please open the gate and let us leave." "That's right, since the House of St. Prospero can't guarantee the stability and safety of White Dew Castle, what right do you have to forcibly detain us? I want to leave today, let's see who dares to stop me." The guards didn't know what to do when they saw the agitated nobles trying to force their way in. The captain of the White Dew Castle guards, Knight Warren, also went to check the situation as soon as he heard the news of the Duchess' death. Knight Warren wasn't there, and the news of the Duchess' death made the guards panic, so they didn't dare to stop the nobles who rushed up. They could only let them forcibly open the gate and leave. Outside the gate, the nobles finally relaxed, but before they could go far, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the street, seemingly waiting for them. Earl of Avon. Distinguished guests, is the House of St. Prospero not a good host? Why are you in such a hurry to leave? the Earl of Avon asked with a smile. The nobles of the eastern region looked at each other, and then one of the viscounts stood up and said, "My Lord Count, it's not that we don't want to stay in White Dew Castle, but there are some problems inside the House of St. Prospero. In order to avoid more chaos and unnecessary misunderstandings, we decided to leave first." Problems? What's the problem in White Dew Castle? The nobles then recounted all the deaths that had occurred in White Dew Castle. After listening, the Earl of Avon's face didn't show any joy or anger, but he said indifferently, "Everyone, the St. Prost family has indeed encountered some difficulties, but don't tell me you intend to leave just because of this? Have you all forgotten the oath of allegiance you once swore?" Such a question immediately caused a commotion among the nobles of the eastern region. Some people were ashamed, some didn't think much of it, and there were also some who remained silent and pretended not to hear it. Count Elvin's gaze slowly swept across the faces of the nobles of the eastern region, taking in their expressions. He wasn't disappointed or angry, because he knew very well that loyalty was actually like a gorgeous vase. Usually, it could be used to put on a facade, but when the real storm came, it would often fall and become a mess. However, not all flower vases are destined to be unable to block the wind and rain, as long as you can show them benefits and hope. What are you panicking about? The House of St. Prospero has been through a lot. Are you going to lose your confidence over such a small issue? The Earl of Avon glanced at the nobles of the eastern region in front of him again, but this time, there was less scrutiny and more encouragement and expectation. "I am confident that I can stabilize the situation in White Dew City, but I need your help. If you believe me, you can stay. If you don't, you can leave. It's your choice. Of course, for those who are willing to stay, on behalf of the House of St. Prospero, I solemnly promise you loyalty will be rewarded." After saying these words, the Earl of Avon turned his back to the nobles of the eastern region, indicating that he would not interfere with their choice. The nobles suddenly became restless. Many people took this opportunity to quietly leave. However, even more people chose to stay behind. Because they realized one thing from the Earl of Avon's confident attitude and his promise now, the Earl of Avon was the first in line to succeed the Eastern region's Duke. If they lent a helping hand at this time, then in the future, when the Earl of Avon succeeded the throne, they would inevitably be rewarded handsomely. On the contrary, if they left now, it would be regarded as a betrayal. Once the Earl of Avon became the Duke of the Eastern region, he would certainly suppress them. If the Duchess was still alive, then most of the nobles of the Eastern region might hesitate. But now, the possibility of the Earl of Avon succeeding the throne was greater than ever. After a while, the Earl of Avon turned around again and showed a sincere smile to the remaining nobles of the Eastern region. "Congratulations, you have made the right choice." An aristocrat stepped out from the crowd and said, "My lord, we believe that you can bring stability and prosperity to the Eastern region. So, if you need us to do anything, please tell us." The Earl of Avon nodded and didn't beat around the bush. "I need you to immediately gather the army and attack the Skyhorse Legion." The nobles of the Eastern region were suddenly dumbfounded. "My lord. Are you sure? You want us to attack the Skyhorse Legion? Shouldn't we be suppressing the traitors of the Nickel family?" The Earl of Avon shook his head and said in a deep voice, "No. The real traitors are the Skyhorse Legion. The Nickel family is the force loyal to the House of St. Prospero." Hearing this, some of the smarter nobles finally reacted. In the Skyhorse Legion, there were forces loyal to the Duke of St. Prospero, Marquis Vincent, the Duchess, and even Knight Ivan. But there were no forces loyal to the Earl of Avon. Therefore, this army of the House of St. Prospero wasn't the Earl of Avon's support at all. On the contrary, it might even be an obstacle to his succession as the Duke of the Eastern region. After some whispering, the slow-witted nobles came back to their senses and agreed with the Earl of Avon's proposal. They were scared to death of the bloody cavalry, but they weren't afraid of the Skyhorse Legion, especially this one that had just been rebuilt and had low fighting power. So, the Earl of Avon ordered the nobles to disperse and gather their own troops. The Earl of Avon stood alone in front of White Dew Castle. After hesitating for a moment, he still didn't choose to enter. Since he had already persuaded the lords to gather their troops to attack the Sky Horse Legion, the Earl of Avon felt that there was no need for him to enter White Dew Castle. The situation in the castle was too complicated and dangerous. At least, before stabilizing the situation in White Dew City, the Earl of Avon wouldn't take the risk. Turning around, the Earl of Avon was about to leave when he saw a familiar figure. "Anna? Why are you here?" Anna looked at her brother coldly and asked, "Brother, you still say that you didn't betray the family?" The Earl of Avon suddenly had a headache and could only patiently explain. "Anna, listen to me. The Sky Horse Legion has long become the source of the chaos in White Dew City. If I want to stabilize the situation, I have to." Anna didn't seem to listen to the Earl of Avon's explanation at all. She pulled out the great sword on her back and rushed over. "Sister. You." Swoosh. The huge sword drew a ferocious arc in the air, but it brushed past the Earl of Avon's body and swept into the shadows at the corner of the street. Boom! A huge figure was forced out amidst the splashing of gravel. He was shrouded in a blood-red curtain of smoke, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of black bat wings stretched out more than 10 meters on both sides. The huge shadow almost covered half of the street. Only then did Count Elvin turn around in shock and blurt out, "My lord, I'm not a lord." Winged Knight. Chapter 492. The two of you, we meet again. Colin looked down at the Earl of Avon and Anna and said in a low voice. Anna held her sword with both hands and stared at Colin nervously because he gave her a lot of pressure. This made Anna extremely shocked because the last time she saw this winged knight in Silvermoon City, he was only at grade 4. But now, in less than 2 years, he seemed to have stepped into the threshold of grade 6. Even Anna, who had always been known as the #1 genius knight in the Eastern region, felt inferior to this speed of promotion. The Earl of Avon did not notice the change in Colin's strength. He just put on an expression of, as expected, and pointed at Colin. "You really have a close relationship with the Angeli family." Colin looked at Count Elvin with great interest and asked, "What's the matter?" "Then guess, what is my relationship with the Angeli family?" The Earl of Avon rubbed his chin and really made a guess. "Actually, I have always felt that Earl Angeli's promotion speed is too fast. He doesn't seem like the descendant of an unknown baron family, but more like the illegitimate son of a paladin family member who left behind in the Angeli family. And you, Mr. Winged Knight, I'm afraid that you are also related to this paladin family member. Maybe he secretly arranged a guardian knight beside his illegitimate son." Clap. Clap. Colin clapped his hands and praised, "Earl of Avon, you are really smart." The Earl of Avon of course heard the sarcasm in Colin's words, but he did not care and continued to guess, "Mr. Winged Knight, if I'm not wrong, you should be a half-elf, right?" "Why?" Colin held back his laughter. "Is it because the last time we met was in the half-elf kingdom?" "No." The Earl of Avon shook his head and pointed at Colin's huge bat wings. "You're a druid, aren't you? Although I don't know how you obtained this profession that should have disappeared along with the extinction of the High Elves, you wouldn't have been able to become a druid without the elven bloodline." Colin neither admitted nor denied the Earl of Avon's guess. He only asked, "You seem to know a lot about druids, don't you?" "I do know a little about it." The Earl of Avon smiled and said, "I also know that there are detailed records about druids in Yeville's Mage Tower. Of course, you may not be able to enter the Mage Tower, but if you need, I can make a copy for you." "Really? Then I really have to thank you." "Of course. The House of St. Prospero has always been hospitable. Since you've come to White Dew City, I naturally have the obligation to treat you well." "Hospitality?" Colin smiled disdainfully and said in a cold tone, I think Count Angeli has some opinions about this evaluation. The Earl of Avon sighed and said, the death of Count Angeli is indeed very regrettable. But if you blame Count Angeli's death on the house of Saint Prospero, then you've been tricked by the assassins. Oh. Colin blinked and asked, do you know who assassinated Count Angeli? The Earl of Avon nodded and said in a sad and regretful tone, if I'm not wrong, it should be my mother who did it. Is that so? Colin laughed silently. Unfortunately, this mocking smile was hidden in the blood mist and the Earl of Avon could not see it. That's right, Mr. Winged Knight. I think you also know that my mother is the Archbishop of the Eastern region, and the Church has been trying to control the Eastern region to prevent the House of Saint Prospero from making peace with other lords. When my father was alive, my mother still had some scruples, but now that my father is dead, she began to become unscrupulous. This time, she even brutally killed Count Angeli in an attempt to completely destroy the relationship between the eastern region and the northern frontier. So, if you really choose to take revenge on the House of Saint Prospero, then you'll be playing into the hands of the Church. Colin waved his bat wings and created an invisible cyclone on the empty street. At the same time, he said, but how come I heard that your mother was also assassinated? Ah, the one who killed my mother was my Aunt Beatrice. There was already a grudge between the two of them. But this is a personal grudge and has nothing to do with Count Angeli's death. You don't have to think too much. Is that so? Colin took a step forward and said coldly, if your mother was really the murderer, but she's already dead. Who else can I take revenge on? The Earl of Avon's expression changed. When he was about to speak, he felt a pressure like the deep sea spreading out from Colin's body and instantly enveloping the whole street. So, Earl of Avon, use your life as a sacrifice to Count Angeli's soul. After saying that, Colin suddenly opened his mouth and sucked hard. Hiss! In an instant, the air on the whole street was crazily rushing toward Colin at the same time. Countless air currents formed a rapidly rotating vortex under the terrifying suction force. The earth was shaking and the air was roaring. The Earl of Avon's body stiffened and cold sweat soaked through his clothes. Anna, who was in front of him, looked solemn. She held her sword in both hands and stood in front of him. The wide blade of the sword was rapidly flowing with holy light, and in an instant, it opened into a huge white six-sided crystal. However, the heavy pressure around him was still rising. In Anna's eyes, the body of the winged knight in front of her seemed to be constantly expanding. Gradually, she had the illusion that the sky was covered by his body. Roar! The next second, Colin slightly opened his mouth, and endless terrifying energy burst out like a tide. It covered the sky and covered the earth, sweeping away everything. The whole street seemed to have been ravaged by a violent tornado, and rows of houses were all destroyed. The white crystal in front of Anna slowly rotated, but it was difficult to maintain it. Small cracks that could be seen with the naked eye had quietly appeared and were rapidly spreading in an uncontrollable trend. Ka! Ka! The cracks extended to the huge sword in Anna's hand, and the magic patterns imprinted on it were shining with dazzling light, but it still could not stop itself from collapsing. Anna's slender body began to tremble, and red blood dripped from her mouth. Only then did the Earl of Avon come back to his senses. With a shake of his arm, a staff inlaid with a huge purple magical crystal slipped from his cuff. Catching the staff, the Earl of Avon quickly made a few gestures in front of his chest. The purple magical crystal shone with a strange light, leaving marks in the air. When the marks gradually formed a complicated magic circle, the Earl of Avon's eyes widened and roared Gilan Salalumenomentivo. Boom! The huge purple magical crystal at the top of the staff in the Earl of Avon's hand suddenly exploded, turning into countless fine powder that drifted in the air. In the dark night sky, a distant star seemed to twinkle. The next moment, the Earl of Avon seemed to have turned into a star. For a moment, the light was boundless. Chapter 493. Asterisk bang. The white crystal shield in front of Anna finally exploded. But at this moment, she no longer needed this shield. A dazzling light erupted from behind her, illuminating the entire street as if it were daytime. Her vision was completely white, and Anna could not see anything clearly, but she could sense the winged knight's position. With the pressure greatly reduced, Anna's nimble body leapt up, and with a few leaps, she closed in on Colin's position. She suddenly swung her great sword, and in that instant, a resplendent white light poured out like a waterfall, heading straight for Colin's head. Clang. Anna only felt as if the broadsword in her hand had collided with a huge mountain, and the huge recoil almost made her lose her grip on the sword hilt. At this moment, the effect of the Earl of Avon's spell was gradually fading. The light faded, and darkness swept in once again, enveloping the entire street. Colin blocked Anna's broadsword with one hand, his skin flashing with a blood-red light, and the dense and complicated patterns intertwined to form an armor-like object, preventing the sharp blade from penetrating even an inch. "You overestimate yourself." Colin snorted coldly, his right hand suddenly clenching tightly. With a crisp crack, the cracks that had already appeared on Anna's broadsword instantly spread, and then completely shattered. Anna's face was filled with shock, and she twisted her slender waist, wanting to pull away. However, Colin's other hand quickly reached out, and immediately grabbed Anna's waist, holding her tightly in his hand. "Back in Silvermoon City, I warned you that if you fall into my hands again, don't expect me to be merciful." After saying that, Colin's large hand began to tighten. "Ah!" Anna let out a blood-curdling scream, and the holy light on her body suddenly burst forth, but she was still unable to break free from Colin's grasp. Her heart was filled with shock and confusion. She could feel that the winged knight in front of her was at the 6th step, and it was expected that she would not be able to win. However, she had fought with her father who was also a knight of the 6th step. Even if she couldn't defeat him, she shouldn't have lost so miserably. Anna discovered that the winged knight's holy light seemed to be the same as hers, but there was actually a difference. It seemed to have a natural suppressive effect on her holy light energy. Under such a suppressive effect, she felt that she was unable to display her true strength. Moreover, this winged knight's strength had clearly exceeded that of an ordinary rank 6 powerhouse. He vaguely felt like he was in the sanctuary realm. Could it be that he was about to ascend to the saint realm? Anna tried her best to support her body and raised her head to stare at Colin. However, she couldn't see Colin's face clearly due to the blood mist. "Please wait a moment." Count Elvin hurriedly shouted when he saw this. Colin smiled and turned to the Earl of Avon. "What's wrong? You want to redeem your sister again? Why can't I?" The Earl of Avon bowed gracefully. "Killing as Saint Prospero will not only bring you no benefits, it will also bring you endless trouble. Since that's the case, why don't you listen to my sincerity?" "Oh. Tell me about your sincerity." Hearing that there was still room for negotiation, the Earl of Avon immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "Last time, I used a magic staff to redeem my sister. This time, I'm willing to take out 3 similar magic staffs. How about it? Of course, if you don't want the magic staff, you can also give me other things." Colin snorted. He didn't seem to be interested in Count Evan's proposal. Instead, he asked, "Answer a few of my questions. If the answers satisfy me, I'll let your sister go." "Please ask." The Earl of Avon immediately agreed. Colin leaned forward slightly and asked, "Who killed Count Angelo?" "I'm actually not sure about this, but I feel that Mother is the most suspicious." Hearing this, Colin snorted angrily and tightened his grip. Crack! Crack! Ah! A series of bone-cracking sounds could be heard as Anna let out a blood-curdling scream. Dark red blood flowed out of her mouth like spring water. It seemed like Colin had crushed many of her ribs. Don't. The Earl of Avon waved his hands repeatedly. Colin's decisive action without any pity for the fairer sex made the Earl of Avon understand that the other party probably knew something. Perhaps this winged knight had hidden by the side and witnessed everything when Mr. Chong was assassinated. Thus, he took a deep breath, as if he had made an important decision, and said in a deep voice, "All right, actually, the person who killed Count Angelo was Mr. Chong." Colin raised his eyebrows, finally confirming his previous conjecture. Mr. Chong and the Earl of Avon had already formed an alliance, and they were the most hidden force in White Dew City. "How did you know?" Colin asked again. "Because Mr. Chong and I planned this. If I remember correctly, Mr. Chong is a remnant of the St. Thean family, right? Shouldn't he be the mortal enemy of the House of St. Prospero? How did you get together with him?" The Earl of Avon seemed to feel that there was no need to hide, so he spoke frankly. "There are no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. Mr. Chong and I both understand this point, and we believe that an alliance can achieve a win-win situation, so we cooperated. Winged Knight, actually, I also admire you very much. As long as you are willing to let my sister go, I can forget all the unpleasantness of the past. You really don't have to doubt my sincerity. Think about it, I can even accept the mortal enemy of the House of St. Prospero, so what is a small misunderstanding between you and me?" Colin did not respond to the Earl of Avon, but continued to ask, "What is Mr. Chong's plan in White Dew City?" The Earl of Avon's eyes flashed, and immediately said, "Of course, it is to help me become the Duke of the Eastern region." "Is that so?" "That's right." The Earl of Avon nodded affirmatively. "The reason why we assassinated Count Angelo was to anger the Blood Cavalry, so that they would rush into the city and wipe out the existing old forces, so that it would be convenient for me to truly control the Eastern region." "You are very honest." Colin nodded. "As long as you are satisfied." The Earl of Avon smiled. "So, can you let my sister go?" Colin slowly shook his head, and coldly said, "But obviously, you are still hiding something." After this sentence, without waiting for the Earl of Avon's explanation, Colin once again tightened his grip on Anna's big hand. However, this time, he did not pinch it. Looking carefully, he saw that the dense platinum lines had already covered Anna's face and body, and the extremely rich holy light was crazily surging, as if the next moment, it would spurt out. Damn! This woman is actually advancing. She can't defeat him, so she advances. Are you a fucking protagonist of a novel? Colin cursed inwardly and immediately grabbed the other hand as well. Using both hands together, he suppressed the turbulent holy light, and at the same time, he quickly closed his eyes. Then, he opened them again. Something seemed to be spinning rapidly in the scarlet pupils. In the next second, a boundless blood curtain spread out in all directions. Vaguely, he seemed to hear a grand and distant voice, "Secret skill of blood, dark gaze." Chapter 494. Asterisk Chi. Asterisk A blood-red light soared into the sky and exploded above White Dew City in the blink of an eye. The blood-red smoke spread out like rippling water, and everyone in the city couldn't help but look up in shock at this wonderful scene. In White Dew Castle, Prince Harrison was awakened by the phenomenon in the sky and finally broke free from his hesitation. His originally pure and flawless eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of blood. "Knight Warren, are you still unwilling to listen to Knight Ivan's orders?" "Your Highness Harrison, I have always maintained the most sincere respect for you, but please forgive my stubbornness." Knight Warren clasped one hand in front of his chest and bowed slightly, but his tone was as firm as iron. "In my opinion, Knight Ivan is not qualified to be the master of White Dew Castle, even if it is only temporary." "If that's the case." Prince Harrison turned to look at Knight Ivan, nodded, and gave him a cold look. Knight Ivan smiled sinisterly and waved his right hand downward. In an instant, a dozen vigorous figures rushed toward Knight Warren, who was surrounded in the middle. Kill! In White Dew City. Viscount Busius stopped and looked up at the blood-red smoke in the sky, frowning. "Sir, this is the messenger sent by the Pegasus Legion." The adjutant led the messenger to Viscount Busius. The messenger didn't care about Viscount's busiest absent-mindedness and only asked in a deep voice. Viscounts, Commander Muffet sent me here to ask why you are mobilizing the army in the middle of the night. Viscount's busiest retracted his gaze and said calmly, "Tell Muffet that I am preparing to lead the army to leave White Dew City and return to the family's territory. Please let us pass." Soon, the messenger brought back news. "Sir, Commander Muffet said that White Dew City is strictly prohibited from entering or leaving tonight. He requests that you immediately lead the army back to the encampment in the city and not move at will." Viscount's busiest looked at the messenger quietly and didn't say a word. The messenger was puzzled when he saw a flash of silver light and a sharp pain in his chest. Then, endless darkness swept over. Viscount Bozius pulled out his sword from the corpse of the emissary and raised it high. Sticky blood dripped down along the sharp edge of the sword. "My loyal soldiers, the Sky Horse Legion has betrayed the eastern region and is ready to kill us all. If you don't want to die, then follow me out of the city. Kill." White Dew City North Gate. Looking at the bloody mist in the sky, as well as the smoke and fire in the city, Nicole's furrowed brows finally relaxed, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth again. "Earl of Avon, have you finally succeeded?" At this point, he didn't hesitate any longer, and he quickly walked down the tower and arrived at the front lines of the battle. Smelling the stench of blood, Count Nicole seemed to have regained the fighting spirit and courage of his youth. He drew his long sword with a choking sound and raised it in front of him. "Brothers, let's charge into the city and rescue Earl Evan St. Prospero. Kill." Outside White Dew City. Knight Roger stared blankly at the bloody mist above White Dew City. The adjutant took a step forward and reported, "Sir, the bloody cavalry is ready to go. When shall we enter the city?" "No hurry," Knight Roger said without turning his head. The adjutant hesitated for a moment, but still persuaded, "But the Earl is still in the city. Aren't you worried that he will be in danger?" Knight Roger shook his head, "But I haven't received the order to enter the city." The adjutant immediately said, "But if the Earl is in danger, how can he deliver the order in time?" Knight Roger smiled mysteriously, "You don't have to worry about that. The Earl will definitely have a way." The adjutant pursed his lips and remained silent. He stood quietly beside Knight Roger, looking at the bloody mist above White Dew City. No one knew what he was thinking. Knight Roger narrowed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Tonight, White Dew City is destined to be covered in blood." At this time, White Dew City was indeed covered in a layer of blood. The lords of the eastern region who were persuaded by the Earl of Avon suddenly attacked the Pegasus Legion. Immediately, the whole city fell into chaos. And because White Dew City was also experiencing a battle, no one tried to stabilize the situation in the city. They could only let it slide into the abyss of losing control. The loss of control of the army spread the flames of war to every corner of the city. It was as if a Pandora's box had been opened, releasing the dark side of the civilians. Theft, arson, murder, rape. Countless crimes took advantage of the chaotic situation in White Dew City. Gradually, the largest city in the eastern region turned into a hell on earth. However, in this sea of blood and fire, there were still some calm corners. In an abandoned warehouse in the west of the city, a group of mage apprentices were concentrating on drawing a huge array on the ground. The chaos and fighting outside seemed to be isolated in another time and space. It didn't affect this place at all. However, the people in the warehouse could clearly observe the situation outside. A figure wearing a red mage robe was staring at the blood-red smoke above White Dew City in a daze. His body was much larger than ordinary people, but he had a serious hunchback. His face was rough, his cheekbones were high, the corners of his mouth were crooked, and his eyes were one big and one small. If one saw him late at night, he would definitely be scared to tears. However, such an ugly mage in a red robe was now standing side by side with Mr. Chong. It seemed that they were quite close. Which family's secret martial arts technique is this? The mage in a red robe suddenly asked. I don't know. Mr. Chung shook his head with a grave expression. You don't know? The mage in a red robe glanced at Mr. Chung in surprise and asked, this power should be at the sanctuary level, right? It's not at the sanctuary level yet. Mr. Chung said with certainty this time, and then added, but it's very close. So, it should be a secret martial arts technique of a paladin family? It should be. Mr. Chung was deep in thought, as if he was calculating which paladin family it was. There were a total of 7 paladin families in the Radiance Empire, but he had never seen any family's martial arts technique that could produce such an effect. Driven by his strong curiosity, Mr. Chung instructed the mage in a red robe, you guys continue to set up, I'll go take a look at the situation. The mage in a red robe frowned and advised, are you sure you want to go? With such a big commotion, Prince Lacey will definitely go take a look, if you meet him. Mr. Chung turned around and glanced at the mage in a red robe, saying, don't worry, I know what I'm doing, I won't delay your matter. Seeing Mr. Chung's firm attitude, the mage in a red robe could only say, all right, then be careful. Chapter 495. Plop. The Earl of Avon collapsed to his knees. A piercing chill invaded his weak body along the cold ground, but the Earl of Avon could no longer stand up. He only felt that the bloody smoke that had swept over him just now seemed to have taken away his blood, strength, and even his soul. At this moment, his hands and feet were soft and weak, and he could not even move. What kind of martial arts was that? The Earl of Avon was full of horror. He tried to turn his eyes to look for his sister. Just now, the aftermath of the attack had already taken away half of his life. Then, what about his sister who was hit directly? Nothing must happen to her. The Earl of Avon could order the lords of the eastern region to lead their troops to encircle and annihilate the Pegasus Legion without blinking an eye. He could deliberately open the gate to lure the bloody cavalry into the city and slaughter the White Dew Castle. He could even watch the White Dew City turn into a bloody hell on earth. But he would never want to see anything happen to his sister, Anna. On the one hand, his sister was simple-minded and had a very good relationship with the Earl of Avon. Even if she suspected that he had betrayed the house of Saint Prospero, when the threat of the winged knights appeared, Anna did not hesitate to stand in front of the Earl of Avon. Even the cold-blooded Earl of Avon was not willing to let her down. More importantly, Anna was the hope for the rise of the eastern region. The house of Saint Prospero had not produced a paladin for a long time. The eastern region really needed a paladin. Now, there was finally a Saint Prospero who had the hope of stepping into the Holy Realm. The Earl of Avon would rather this plan fail than see Anna get into an accident. As long as Anna was there, even if the White Dew City turned into ruins, the Earl of Avon was confident that he could start over again. But if Anna died, the future of the eastern region would still be bleak. Even if the Earl of Avon succeeded in becoming the Duke of the eastern region, it would be difficult for him to escape the predicament of struggling to survive among the various forces. Finally, the Earl of Avon saw Anna lying quietly in front of him. Her current appearance was incomparably miserable. Her entire body was covered in blood, and it was unknown how many wounds she had. All of her joints were in an unnatural state, and she looked like a broken rag doll. However, Earl of Avon still noticed her slightly heaving chest. He was still alive. But in the next second, as the ground trembled, a huge shadow enveloped Anna. Colin slowly walked over, his heart filled with surprise. The Angeli family didn't have any profound martial arts inheritance. Therefore, he had always relied on his strength to crush his opponents and win with brute force. The secret blood spell that he released earlier was actually something he learned when he saw the strange silver python while he was in a trance when he advanced to rank 6. No, it wasn't comprehended. It was more like the silver python's inheritance. Just now, when Anna suddenly advanced to the 6th step, Colin subconsciously used it in a moment of desperation. The effect was amazing. Of course, it was a little too amazing. After causing such a big commotion, Colin was vigilant. He decided to quickly deal with these two people and then quickly leave. After all, he didn't forget that there were still two saint-level powerhouses in the city. If they were attracted here, it would be troublesome. But just as he waved his iron fist and was about to smash Anna's head, a weak voice suddenly sounded. "You can't kill her." It was the Earl of Avon struggling to shout. But Colin ignored him. His fist was aimed at Anna's head, and he smashed it down. "Don't you want to know Mister's real plan?" The fist stopped a centimeter away from Anna's head. Colin raised his head and looked at the Earl of Avon. "What's Mister's plan?" The Earl of Avon chuckled and asked, "Do you know why I have to make White Dew City completely chaotic?" Colin was slightly startled, as if he had thought of something. The Earl of Avon continued, "Even if I want to eliminate Mother's remaining forces, I can just kill a few key people. Why do I have to instigate the Alliance to attack the Pegasus Legion?" Colin narrowed his eyes, and the ominous premonition in his heart grew stronger. Count Elvin's expression suddenly became extremely excited and even deranged. He laughed strangely and asked, "Don't worry." He laughed and said, "Also, have you noticed that the flames of war in White Dew City are spreading a little too quickly?" Colin raised his head and noticed that the flames of war in White Dew City were indeed a little strange. Although this kind of night battle would inevitably cause fires, and there was also the tactic of deliberately setting fires to drive away the enemy, the speed at which the flames in White Dew City were spreading was still too shocking. Clearly, someone was deliberately setting fires in the chaos. Looking at the sky illuminated by the raging flames, Colin couldn't help but think of Fallen Eagle City a year ago. When Fallen Eagle City was burned, it was the scene of flames soaring into the sky. Thinking of this, Colin completely understood and said in a deep voice, "So your real target is Prince Lexi." The Earl of Avon laughed out loud, and his face became a little distorted. "That's right. Mr. helped me ascend to the position of Duke of the Eastern Region. In exchange, I destroyed the entire White Dew City and helped him kill Prince Lexi. Don't you think this deal is very fair?" Ha ha ha. Colin's gaze suddenly turned to one of pity. Count Oman was unknowingly sacrificed by Mr. Cheng to Fallen Eagle City. As for you, you're actually crazy enough to take the initiative to help Mr. Feng sacrifice White Dew City. In order to become the Duke of the Eastern Region, you really don't even care about your bottom line. Bottom line? Ha ha ha. The Earl of Avon laughed so hard that he was out of breath. The weak have no right to talk about the bottom line. Colin looked at the crazed Earl of Avon, his heart filled with disgust and disdain. In fact, when Colin had first met the Earl of Avon in Silvermoon City, he had thought that he was a noble young master with character and brains. But after peeling off his layers of disguise, he realized that this person was actually cowardly, crazy, and a self-righteous person who seemed smart but was actually stupid. "Are you worthy of being the Duke of the Eastern Region?" Colin sneered. Count Elvin finally stopped laughing crazily and said with his eyes wide open, he glared and said, "I'm not worthy of being the Duke of the Eastern Region. I've sacrificed so much for this. If I'm not worthy, then who is?" Sacrificed? The mockery on Colin's face intensified. He shook his head, as if he didn't want to bother with this incorrigible Earl of Avon. He raised his fist again, ready to send the Saint Prospero siblings to hell. Seeing this, the Earl of Avon's face turned serious. He said, "Do you know why I'm telling you so much?" Colin was stunned for a moment, then he heard a deep and familiar voice behind him. "He's stalling for time, waiting for me to come." Colin suddenly turned around and saw Mr. Cheng standing there quietly, his eyes full of inquiry. Chapter 496. You are the Winged Knight. Mr. Echidna's eyes slowly scanned Colin's body, as if he could see through the layer of blood mist and see every detail of Colin's, true body of a vampire, state. Colin only felt that Mr. Echidna's eyes were like a butcher who was about to slaughter a pig, thinking about where to start. Yes. I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Echidna. Mr. Echidna carefully sized up Colin and suddenly made a suggestion. Winged Knight, if you swear allegiance to me now, not only can I let you live, I can also help you obtain all the books about druids in the Wizard Tower. I can even lend you the sacred item of the druids, the Wild Heart, to study in study. Colin pretended to think for a moment and smiled. What if I'm not willing to swear loyalty to you? Mr. Echidna said indifferently, then I can only kill you and study your corpse. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold, as if even the air had frozen. Earl of Avon, who was still lying on the ground, tried to persuade him with a gloating tone. Winged Knight, why are you so stubborn? Count Angeli is already dead, why don't you choose to follow a master with a better future? Colin sneered and said, no one is qualified to be my master. Before he finished speaking, Colin had already spread his bat wings and soared into the sky. Asterisk whoosh asterisk the violent cyclone swept up a cloud of dust, but in the next second, it strangely came to an abrupt stop. Colin, who was flying in the air, looked like a butterfly in amber, awkwardly stopped in midair. Colin's body surged with holy light, and the blood mist around him became thicker, as if blood was about to drip out. Asterisk roar asterisk an earth-shattering lion's roar echoed in the sky. Colin only felt that the blood in his body was boiling uncontrollably, and a strong sense of danger swept over him, causing him to desperately flap his bat wings. Asterisk swoosh asterisk a golden light flashed across the sky, turning everything in its path into nothingness. Colin moved his body out of the golden light's path by a hair's breadth, but the left half of his bat wing was still hit. In the intense pain, Colin was shocked to find that half of his left wing had been sliced off. Like a plane hit by a cannonball, Colin lost control in the air, spinning and falling straight to the ground. But the moment he was about to land, he struggled to fly again. Although his posture was ugly, Colin did not dare to stay for a moment, and he used all his strength to soar into the sky. Mr. Echidna saw this, unhurriedly, bent his knees slightly, and then kicked with force. Asterisk boom asterisk the ground instantly caved in the sky. Asterisk the Strong's body was rapidly closing the distance between him and Colin. Count Evan tried his best to turn his head, wanting to see his enemy killed by Mr. Chien with his own eyes. Echidna's, in the next second, the knight's eyes suddenly. This was because another figure had appeared in the pitch-black night sky, standing between Mr. Fong and Colin. The man stood in the air and spread out his limbs. Asterisk boom. Asterisk a blinding white light surged out from his body, scattering in all directions. The huge column of light was like a laser beam, sweeping through everything in its surroundings. In an instant, the originally dark night sky turned into a scene as bright as day. The figure released the terrifying power of the holy light. His eyes shone with a dark golden luster as he looked down. Mr. Echidna's body suddenly stopped. Mr. Echidna could not be bothered to chase after Colin, who was flying in a crooked trajectory in the air, fleeing further and further away. That was because Prince Lexi was blocking his way. I've finally caught you, Mr. Echidna. Prince Rhy said expressionlessly, but everyone could hear the unconcealable anger in his voice. Prince Lexi had never been at a disadvantage in the hands of anyone since he was promoted to the sanctuary level. Only Mr. Echidna, who was only a 6th level mage back then, was able to play a holy knight like a fiddle, to the point where his reputation was ruined and he could no longer be seen in the world. With such hatred, it was no wonder that Prince Lexi chased Mr. Echidna all the way from the northern frontier to the eastern region. We meet again, Prince Lexi. Mr. Echidna revealed a sincere smile, as if he was greeting an old friend who had been separated for a long time. Prince Lexi looked coldly at Mr. Echidna, and then said in an icy tone, "You have blasphemed the corpse of a holy knight. Mr. Echidna, you will become the public enemy of the Empire for desecrating the body of a holy knight." Mr. Echidna smiled nonchalantly, and said, "Is that so?" But the strange thing is, I can always find one ally after another in the Empire. Hearing this, the Earl of Avon shrunk his neck guiltily, as if he was afraid that Prince Lexi would notice him. While he was in a daze, the two holy knights in the sky suddenly started fighting. An extremely dense holy light instantly enveloped the entire city, completely dispelling the darkness of the night. The Earl of Avon wanted to see what was going on, but he found that he could not open his eyes at all. It was as if the sun was exploding above his head, and the blinding light could not be looked directly at. Buzz, there was a roar in his ears, and the Earl of Avon found that he could not hear anything. Fresh red blood flowed out from his eyes, nose, and ears, and his consciousness entered a trance. When the aftermath of the battle finally dissipated, the Earl of Avon slowly woke up. He tried to open his eyes, but found that the night sky had returned to darkness, and Mr. Echidna and Prince Lexi were nowhere to be seen. The faint roar was like thunder, and it came from the east of the city from time to time, accompanied by lightning-like bursts of holy light. It seemed that the battle between the two holy knights had not ended, and they had just changed places. The Earl of Avon tried to get up, but found that he could not move at all. Anna, Anna. The Earl of Avon tried to wake his sister up. After shouting for a while, Anna finally moaned and slowly opened her eyes. The Earl of Avon was overjoyed, but before he could be happy for too long, he heard a piercing sound. Then, the Earl of Avon's smile froze on his face. That was because that nightmarish figure had actually returned. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Colin landed heavily on the ground and smiled at the trembling Earl of Avon. Earl of Avon, can Mr. Echidna still save you now? The Earl of Avon's mouth twitched, and he cried out in shock and anger. Don't kill me. Whatever you want, just say it, and I'll satisfy you. Colin smiled coldly and said, Do you really think that you have any bargaining chips that you can use to exchange? Even if you really become the Duke of the Eastern region, you can't give me what I want. Wait. Anna cried out in alarm, As long as you let my brother go, I'm willing to pledge my loyalty to you. Pledge your loyalty? Colin laughed disdainfully, I can't afford to accept the loyalty of Saint Prospero. If it had been before Marquis Vincent's betrayal, Colin might not have minded having a Holy Knight bloodline descendant, but now, he was not foolish enough to turn an enemy into a bloodline descendant. Moreover, he had just been taught a lesson by the Lord Reader, so he did not dare to show mercy. Pooh! With a stomp, the Earl of Avon's head exploded like a watermelon. Chapter 497. No. Anna let out a shrill scream, and then rushed toward Colin without a care for anything else. Although she had advanced to the 6th step, Anna had just been severely injured by Colin. How could she be a match for Colin with her heavily injured body? Colin did not have the slightest intention of showing mercy to the fairer sex. With a flap of his bat wings, he sent Anna flying. Then, with a leap, he pounced on Anna's body, opened his big mouth, aimed at Anna's slender white neck and bit down. Although he would not turn her into a blood kin, turning her into a blood thrall would not be a problem. After all, a blood thrall's self-awareness had already been erased, and there would be no problem of betrayal. Just like that crazy woman Cynthia Sue Duo who wanted to kill Colin the moment she saw him, she was also as obedient as a little kitten after becoming a blood thrall. However, after erasing her self-awareness, it was estimated that this star of the Eastern region who had a high chance of stepping into the Holy Realm would have no chance of becoming a Holy Knight. But Colin did not have any other choice at this time. It would be a pity to kill her, and it would be too dangerous to turn her into a blood kin to retain her self-awareness. Therefore, he could only turn her into a blood thrall and become a high-level fighter. Gudu. Pudgy, after a round of sucking and injecting, Colin got up from Anna's body. The fire in the city was raging at an alarming speed. The cold ground was actually starting to heat up, and the air was filled with the smell of burnt smoke. The soaring flames illuminated the sky above White Dew City as if it was daytime. Coupled with the aftermath of the holy light that erupted during the battle between Mr. Chong and Prince Lexi, White Dew City was exceptionally lively tonight. Colin grabbed the unconscious Anna in his hand, and then with a flap of his bat wings, soared into the sky, and quietly flew toward the place where the holy light erupted. He did not want to see Prince Lexi die in Mr. Chong's hands. First of all, Prince Lexi had just saved Colin's life, and this was a favor that Colin had to repay. Secondly, if Prince Rhy died, then no one would be able to control Mr. Chong. Colin could not let the other paladin of the Empire of Light, Duke Sangarayan, chase after Mr. Chong all day long. At that time, the northern frontier and the eastern frontier of the Empire would tremble under Mr. Feng's shadow. Moreover, Colin suspected that Mr. Feng's real plan was not just to kill Prince Rhy. At this moment, the fire in the city clearly indicated that Mr. Chong was preparing to cast the forbidden spell he had cast in Fallen Eagle City, Trial's Eye. However, after seeing Mr. Khan use the corpse of the Duke of St. Hilda to resurrect himself, Colin guessed that the Trial's Eye was not an isolated forbidden spell. The petrified corpse of a paladin was obviously very useful. It was highly possible that there was another related forbidden spell that could allow the caster to occupy the petrified corpse of the Holy Knight. Now that Mr. Chong was occupying the corpse of the Duke of St. Hilda, he was obviously using the power of the Holy Knight's holy light. Even if he repracticed arcane magic, it would be impossible for him to return to the peak of rank 6 in a short year. Therefore, this Trial's Eye spell was definitely being cast by another rank 6 wizard, and it should be this person who was about to occupy the petrified corpse of Prince Rhy. If they really succeeded, then Mr. Chong would have 2 paladins at once. This would definitely be a devastating blow to the current order of the Empire. Perhaps the wizards would replace the nobles and become the new ruling class of humans. Therefore, whether it was for public or private reasons, Colin had to save Prince Rhy. Asterisk poof. Asterisk red flames soared into the sky, blocking Count Nicole's path forward. It also made it impossible for him to continue chasing the fleeing Pegasus Legion. Count Nicole, there's something wrong with this fire. The adjutant ran over, sweating profusely. Should we withdraw from White Dew City first? Asterisk cough cough cough. Asterisk Count Nicole was choked by the thick smoke and couldn't stop coughing. At this moment, he realized that something was wrong and decisively ordered, withdraw. Withdraw from White Dew City first. Yes, sir. However, when Count Nicole led his army to the city gates, he found that the narrow gates were already filled with the fleeing citizens of White Dew City. Count Nicole, what should we do? Count Nicole turned around to look at the raging fire behind him. He made up his mind and growled, fire. He roared, kill our way out. The adjutant hesitated for a moment, but then he accepted the order. Yes, sir. Thus, the Nicole army began to recklessly charge towards the city gates. Everyone who stood in their way, regardless of whether they were old or weak, women or children, was cut down to the ground. At this critical juncture of life and death, they no longer had the time to care about their responsibilities as soldiers and not hurting the innocent. Driven by their survival instincts, the Nicole family's army fought their way out of White Dew City, carving out a bloody path. However, the ability to pass through the 4 city gates was extremely limited. White Dew City was the largest city in the eastern region, with a population of 1 million. Most of the people were still trapped in the city. Colin flew in the air and looked down. He saw that the raging flames in White Dew City had gradually spread into fiery dragons. They swam along a fixed path, interweaving into a mysterious and complicated arcane spell formation. The center of the spell formation was not far from the west side of White Dew Castle. All the flames strangely avoided that location, as if there was an invisible barrier that isolated everything. Many people also discovered this invisible barrier and rushed over, wanting to escape the flames. However, this barrier not only isolated the flames, it also kept the crowd outside. They shouted and prayed, but it was of no use. They could only be swallowed up by the raging sea of flames behind them. Colin continued to approach in the air. He could already smell the fragrance of roasted meat. The tragic scene in front of him caused his heart to turn cold. His surging murderous intent was about to burst forth uncontrollably. He could be considered a veteran general who had been on the battlefield for a long time. He had seen many scenes of corpses piling up like mountains. He had even personally ordered the slaughter of tens of thousands of captives. However, the act of sacrificing an entire city had crossed Colin's bottom line. No matter what excuses Mr. Fong and the others had, Colin could not tolerate such an inhumane act. At this moment, he had completely developed the desire to kill Mr. Fong. No matter what his stance was, no matter what price he had to pay, he had to kill this scourge of the human race. Bang. Colin also crashed into the barrier. A faint green light appeared in front of Colin. It was like a sturdy eggshell, covering the center of the spell formation. Open for me. Colin roared. The giant bat wings on his back flapped violently. His entire body seemed to turn into a golden arrow of light, piercing into the barrier. At this moment, in the abandoned warehouse at the center of the barrier, the red-robed mage opened his ugly eyes. Around him, a large spell formation was emitting a dense green light. It faintly resonated with the raging sea of flames in White Dew City. Rip. The red-robed mage suddenly pulled out a dagger and unhesitatingly gouged out his left eye. Chapter 498. Bang! Colin landed heavily on the ground. Compared to the steamer-like scene outside the barrier, the inside was like an ice cave. Of course, this was actually the temperature that should be there at this time of the year. There was no smell of burning in the air. Instead, there was a faint mist in the air. However, there was a faint smell of blood in the mist. It was very similar to the smell that Colin smelled on Mr. Feng's body, as well as the smell that he smelled in the underground blood pool of the Phoenix Butterfly Castle's clock tower. The inside of the barrier was very spacious. The quiet streets surrounded a dilapidated and decayed warehouse. A faint green light shone out from the warehouse, flickering like the frequency of breathing. It made people feel that something terrible was being nurtured inside, and it might break out of its shell in the next second. Anna, who was in Colin's hand, had also woken up. Her eyes were dull, but she obeyed Colin's orders. However, she had not fully recovered from her serious injuries, so she could not exert much combat power. However, it was more than enough to explore the way. Under Colin's orders, Anna slowly walked toward the warehouse's door. Outside the barrier, the city was on fire, and screams were everywhere. However, here, it was dead silent. It gave Colin the illusion that he had come to a cemetery in the middle of the night. Anna walked all the way to the warehouse's door, but nothing happened. Colin narrowed his eyes and cautiously approached. At this moment, Anna opened the warehouse's door. Buzz! In an instant, countless green threads surged out of the door like poisonous snakes. They engulfed Anna's slender body in an instant, and then rushed towards Colin at a high speed. Along the way, the green threads spun and danced. Everything that they touched was quickly assimilated, disintegrated, and then turned into more green threads. If someone with trypophobia saw this scene, they would probably collapse on the spot. Although Colin did not have trypophobia, his scalp was still numb. He spread his wings and immediately soared into the sky. However, those green threads still chased after him relentlessly. Colin took a deep breath, and a rapidly spinning invisible vortex appeared around him. A terrifying pressure spread out from his body, and under the surging pressure, the encirclement of the green threads also slowed down. Colin fiercely flapped his wings, and an even more explosive cyclone suddenly spread out, instantly suppressing the green threads below. However, before Colin could breathe a sigh of relief, an invisible sound wave rippled out from the warehouse. Hiss! In the next second, the countless green threads instantly went berserk, turning into blood-red threads that surged toward Colin in an even more frenzied manner. When they approached Colin, the red threads turned into venomous snakes. They opened their terrifying mouths and hissed at Colin. Colin only felt an extremely cold and gloomy aura enveloping his entire body, causing his body to stiffen like a rock. Even moving a finger was extremely strenuous. What kind of strange spell was this? Colin cursed inwardly as he quickly closed his eyes. Then, he opened them again. 3 thin silver threads suddenly appeared in his scarlet pupils, and then began to spin rapidly. Secret blood technique, gloomy gaze. In the next second, a boundless curtain of blood spread out in all directions, instantly drowning out the countless venomous snake-like red threads. Hiss, hiss, hiss like ice and snow under the scorching sun, the red threads all melted under Colin's attack. Bang! Colin landed on the ground again. All the red threads had disappeared, as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion. Anna also stood up again, but her original refined gold armor was already in tatters, revealing large areas of her delicate skin. And on her exposed skin, there were dark red marks crawling all over, which should be the wounds left by that strange spell just now. Colin would not feel sorry for a blood thrall, and immediately urged her to continue forward. After entering the warehouse, they immediately heard the sounds of intense fighting, as well as the ripples of holy light and arcane spells. Colin followed in and found Anna fighting with a dozen mages. However, in such a narrow space, to be closed in by a 6th-level knight, even if it was only a heavily injured 6th-level knight, these mages were destined to lose. As expected, Anna was like a cheetah that had charged into a flock of sheep. As she moved and jumped, she quickly cut the throats of the mages who had not yet finished their incantations. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, as if it was an artistic performance of slaughter. However, Colin was not in the mood to enjoy this performance. From the moment he entered the warehouse, his gaze had been fixed on the center of the warehouse, on the figure wearing a red mage robe. So ugly. This was the first impression that the red-robed mage left on Colin. However, Colin did not dare to let his guard down. The complicated and mysterious spell formation on the ground was still emitting bursts of green light. The red-robed mage in the center of the spell formation held a magic staff in one hand and a bloody eyeball in the other as he chanted. Colin looked at the bloody hole in the left eye and immediately knew that the eyeball belonged to the red-robed mage himself. Thick green smoke enveloped the red-robed mage and formed a huge green cocoon on top of his head. The green cocoon expanded and contracted, flickering as if it had a life of its own. Colin had seen this scene before in Fallen Eagle City. At that time, he had a way to interrupt Mr. Burley's spellcasting and let the Duke of St. Hilda live. Unfortunately, he hesitated at that time. This time, he would not hesitate anymore. However, Colin did not personally go forward to interrupt the red-robed mage's spellcasting. This was because the strange spell from before had left him with a lingering fear. Moreover, Mr. Burley almost failed the last time, so it was impossible for him not to be more careful this time. Therefore, Colin did not act rashly. Instead, he waited for Anna to finish off the low-level mages before urging her to go forward with her sword. The red-robed mage's ugly single eye looked at the approaching Anna as he continued to chant the mysterious elvish language. It seemed that he was at the crucial moment of spellcasting and had no time to care about anything else. Even when Anna was right in front of him, the red-robed mage still did not have any intention to defend himself. Whoosh! The long sword in Anna's hand pierced straight into the red-robed mage's chest, but strangely, there was not a single drop of blood. Colin frowned. Just as he was puzzled, he saw the red-robed mage's chest suddenly split open. Bang! Countless blood-red threads surged out and turned into tiny poisonous snakes along the way, all of them hissing ferociously at Anna and Colin. Hiss! Colin only felt his body stiffen, and his thoughts seemed to have become sluggish at this moment. Everything in front of him also became unreal. Chapter 499. Colin. A familiar voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Colin opened his eyes and found that he was no longer in the warehouse. Instead, he was in an endless wilderness. Anna and the red-robed mage were nowhere to be seen. He was all alone. Colin. The voice sounded again. Of course, Colin could tell that it was Vera's voice. However, he also knew that it was just an illusion. However, even though he knew that it was just an illusion, this pure and charming voice was still able to arouse the desire in Colin's heart. He could not help but blush as his body heated up. He tried hard to find the source of the voice, but he found that it seemed to be coming from all directions. He could not locate it at all. Whoosh! Colin spread his wings and soared into the sky. However, even after flying for a long time, the scenery in front of him did not change at all. There was an endless wilderness. There were no people, no buildings, and no animals. There was only a horizon that he could never reach. Colin. The voice that sounded like Vera sounded again. I am right here. Come quickly. This time, Colin found the source of the voice. It was right below him. When he looked down, he found Vera standing there. She was wearing a red velvet dress, and her golden waist-length hair still had traces of water vapor, as if she had just taken a bath. Her fair skin exuded a moving blush, making people want to take a bite out of it. Bang! Colin returned to the ground and saw Vera smiling sweetly. She lifted her dress and ran towards him. Every time she took a step, green grass and white flowers would appear under her feet. When she rushed into Colin's arms, the originally barren wilderness had turned into a green grassland. He could even see a few butterflies dancing in the grass. He could also vaguely hear the chirping of birds. The touch and smell of the girl in his arms was so beautiful and familiar that he could not help but be intoxicated. Colin held Vera's waist with one hand and gently stroked her hair with the other. In the next second, his big hand exerted a force. Crack! Then, he twisted the head of the girl in his arms. Woo! A gust of wind blew, as if the soul of a young girl was crying. Colin. Vera's voice sounded again. However, this time, the voice did not come from his chest, but from behind him. Colin slowly turned around and saw another Vera standing quietly in front of him. Her face was full of resentment and confusion. Don't you love me anymore? As she spoke, 2 lines of tears flowed down Vera's cheeks. Colin smiled faintly and said, but I don't know which you to love. Of course it's me, the second Vera replied. Colin pointed at the corpse in his arms and asked, then who is this? That's not me, take a closer look. Colin lowered his head and was surprised to find that the corpse in his arms with its head twisted off had the appearance of Queen Aisha. Colin smiled and muttered to himself, this is really interesting. After saying that, he casually threw Queen Elsa's body away. Then, he opened his arms and made a gesture to welcome Vera. Vera smiled and lifted her skirt again before she ran towards Colin. However, just as she was about to jump into Colin's arms, Colin suddenly closed his arms. Poof! Vera's head was crushed by Colin. Blood and flesh splattered all over Colin's body, but he did not avoid it. He just quietly felt this moment where it was hard to distinguish between reality and illusion. Colin. The third Vera appeared on the grass again and waved her white and tender arms as she smiled at Colin. Come and play with me. Okay. Colin flapped his wings and flew towards her. This time, he took the initiative to hug the girl. Vera giggled and she seemed to enjoy the hug of her lover. However, in the next second, Colin opened his mouth and bit Vera's slender white neck. Gulp, gulp, unexpectedly, Colin found that he could actually suck the blood of this Vera. As Colin continued to suck, everything around him changed drastically. The blue sky suddenly turned blood red, and the green grass became barren again. The butterflies and birds all disappeared, and the world gradually returned to its original deathly stillness. Whoosh, suddenly, it started to rain. Colin raised his head from Vera's body and he realized that the raindrops falling from the sky were actually blood. The strong smell of blood filled the air and it was almost suffocating. Hiss. Colin lowered his head and saw that Vera in his arms had already turned into a red venomous snake. She was opening her bloody mouth and biting towards him. Bang! Colin smashed the snake's head with his fist. The snake's body slowly fell to the ground and turned into a pool of blood that melted on the ground. However, in the next moment, the blood rain that fell from the sky formed a huge snake's head in the air and it bit down on Colin. Bang! Colin smashed the snake's head again. However, in the next moment, another snake's head appeared in the air. There seemed to be an endless number of snakes and he could never kill them all. Colin frowned and he realized that he would not be able to get rid of the illusion. He had to find another way. He also remembered that he had discussed with Vera about the secrets of the arcane art of illusion. At that time, Vera had told him that everything in the illusion was not real except for the victim himself. Therefore, the only way to get rid of the illusion was to find the only one who was real. The only one who was real. Thus, when the blood-red snakehead attacked again, Colin stood quietly in the same spot and did not resist. Pfft! The giant snake bit down on Colin's waist and a lot of blood spurted out. However, Colin did not feel anything. It was as if it was not his body at all. Time seemed to have stopped. Everything around him was slowed down in an instant. Time and space slowed down like a slow-motion scene in a movie. The darkness that emerged from the depths of Colin's soul completely drowned his consciousness. In a trance, Colin felt as if he was standing on a huge blood-red lake. The surface of the lake was like a mirror. When he looked down, he saw his own reflection standing under his feet. It was the same reflection. The blood-red lake rippled slowly under Colin's feet, and it seemed to be constantly closing the distance between Colin and his own reflection. All of a sudden, Colin had an epiphany. "You are me," he said to the reflection under his feet. "This is me. I am Colin Angeli." In an instant, thousands of rays of light exploded. Everything was distorted, softened, and dissipated under the scorching temperature. Time accelerated and the world returned to normal. When he opened his eyes again, Colin was already back in the warehouse of White Dew City. The huge spell formation on the ground was still emitting green light. In the middle of the spell formation, Anna stood there in a daze. The sharp sword in her hand did not stab the red-robed mage, but a scarecrow covered in blood. When the red-robed mage next to the scarecrow realized that Colin had gotten rid of the illusion, his ugly face immediately showed an expression of disbelief. "You? How did you?" The corner of Colin's mouth twitched, revealing a ferocious smile. As he flapped his wings, it was as if he had turned into a blood-red arrow, arriving in front of the red-robed mage in an instant. Wait, crack! Colin did not care about the red-robed mage's pleas for mercy. He directly twisted the mage's head off. Chapter 500. Bang! The moment the red-robed mage's head was twisted off by Colin, the green cocoon that was floating above his head suddenly burst open. The inside of the green cocoon was empty, only the dense green light shooting out in all directions. Colin realized that his vision was completely occupied by the green light, and he could not see anything else. Even if he closed his eyes, it was still the same. However, after realizing that the green light did not harm him, Colin calmed down and waited patiently. After a while, the green light finally dissipated. Colin opened his eyes again and realized that the green cocoon above his head had disappeared. The gigantic spell formation below his feet was now flickering with a faint light, and the frequency of the flickering was increasing, as if something drastic was about to happen. Colin did not have any intention of staying any longer, and immediately lifted Anna by the back of her neck, flapped his wings, and prepared to leave. However, just as he was about to break through the roof of the warehouse, Colin circled back, and used his other hand to lift the red-robed mage's corpse, and once again soared into the sky. Bang! After breaking through the roof and flying high into the sky, Colin turned back to look at the location of the warehouse. After he left, the entire building began to slowly collapse. But the strange thing was, after the collapse, the ground was not the ruins of the warehouse, but a bottomless black hole. After that, the fire dragons that were originally wreaking havoc in the White Dew City followed their previous tracks and headed towards the center of the spell formation, which was where the black hole was located, and quickly gathered. And the fire dragons that gathered were all swallowed by the black hole without exception. It was as if these fire dragons did not belong to this time and space, and now they finally followed the black hole back to where they belonged. Following the disappearance of the fire dragons, the fire in the White Dew City was gradually extinguished. Seeing this, Colin heaved a sigh of relief. He was originally worried about how to save the fire. But now, it seemed that he did not need to worry about this. Luckily, the fire did not burn for too long, and a portion of the residents in the White Dew City would probably survive. Whoosh whoosh, two golden rays of light suddenly approached the black hole from the east of the city. Seeing this, Colin knew that it was the two holy knights that were fighting, and hurriedly flapped his wings, and disappeared into the dark night in the blink of an eye. "Mr. Chong, it seems that your plan has failed," Prince Rhy said expressionlessly, but there was a hint of schadenfreude in his tone. Mr. Kuei looked at the huge black hole in front of him, as if he could see through the hole and see the situation in another world. He sighed and said, "Prince Lacey, it seems like you've managed to escape death." "Escape?" Prince Lacey snorted and said disdainfully, "It seems like you're the one who's been running away." Mr. Feng smiled faintly, as if he was not affected by the failure of the plan, nor was he angered by Prince Rhy's mockery. "It can't be helped. I haven't fully adapted to this body, so I'm afraid I can't compete with you for the time being." After saying this, Mr. Tai immediately turned into a golden stream of light and soared into the sky. "Do you think you can escape?" Prince Lacey roared and immediately chased after him. Outside White Dew City. Count Nickel was still in shock as he looked at White Dew City engulfed in raging flames. Although he was lucky, he also felt a strong sense of unreality. Was White Dew City going to be destroyed again? A group of soldiers wearing the uniform of the Pegasus Legion rushed out of the city, but before they could escape the sea of fire, the flames suddenly swallowed them along with their horses. The soldiers who were still breathing rolled and struggled in the sea of fire, letting out ear-piercing screams that made one's hair stand on end. Endless screams came from the city, making people unable to bear to listen to them. Count Nickel looked at the scene in front of him and seemed to finally realize something. Suddenly, tears flowed down his old face as he muttered, "Earl of Avon, is this your real plan?" At this moment, the ground suddenly began to tremble. Thud thud thud, the continuous sound of horse hooves sounded from behind, and it became clearer and clearer. The adjutant ran over in a panic and reported, "Count Nickel. Your Excellency, the bloody cavalry is coming. Shall we retreat first?" Count Nickel smiled bitterly and said, "You are right. Retreat? Where else can we retreat to?" The adjutant was speechless. After a while, he asked again, "Should we get into formation immediately?" "Get into formation?" Count Nickel pointed to the group of extremely embarrassed and frightened soldiers around him and asked, "Even if they get into formation, can they still withstand a round of charge from the bloody cavalry?" Looking at Count Nickel, who seemed to have completely given up on himself, the adjutant opened his mouth, but could not think of any words to persuade him. The sound of horse hooves was getting closer and closer. In the blink of an eye, the army of the Nickel family was surrounded by the bloody cavalry. Fortunately, the bloody cavalry did not intend to attack. Instead, they sent a messenger to find Count Nickel and said, "Count Nickel, Knight Roger invites you to come over." Normally, in the face of such a condescending invitation, even if Count Nickel knew that he had to go, he would at least put on an act. But now, looking at the White Dew City in the sea of fire, Count Nicholl suddenly felt disheartened. He said nothing and just followed the messenger, like a prisoner who had surrendered, to the position of the bloody cavalry. Count Nicholl. Hearing someone call his name, Count Nicholl, who was in a trance, slowly came back to his senses. He raised his head and looked at the high-spirited knight of the northern frontier in front of him, and said respectfully, "Knight Roger, this time I let you see a joke. Also, I'm deeply sorry about the unfortunate death of Count Angeli, who told you that Count Angeli was unfortunately killed." Ah! Count Nicholl was stunned. He opened his mouth wide and did not know what to say for a moment. Knight Roger smiled and said, "Count Angeli just sent a message, asking us to prepare to enter the city." Enter the city. Count Nicholl did not have time to think about whether Count Angeli was dead or not. He pointed at the White Dew City in the Sea of Fire, and his eyes were full of doubts. "Are you crazy?" Count Nicholl wondered if Roger was a little delirious. Knight Roger did not seem to see the doubts in Count Nicholl's eyes, and continued to say, "Yes, we are preparing to enter the city. However, due to the heavy losses of the House of Saint Prospero in this rebellion, the eastern region needs a respectable noble to stand up and take charge of the situation and appease the people. Count Angeli thinks that you are very suitable, but I don't know if you are willing to take on this responsibility." Count Nicholl thought that Knight Roger was really crazy. Entering the city now? Wasn't that asking for death? Just when Count Nicholl was hesitating about how to wake up the commander of the bloody cavalry, suddenly there was a burst of cheers behind him. "The fire is out! The fire is out! This is a miracle from the God of Light! Quick, quick! Enter the city to save people!" Chapter 501. Count Nicholl suddenly turned around and saw that the Sea of Fire in White Dew City had miraculously extinguished. The fire had come in a strange manner and left in an even stranger manner. Count Nicholl was even more certain that this was not an ordinary fire. The rumors about Fallen Eagle City surfaced in his mind once again. Count Nicholl looked at Roger with bright eyes and asked in a deep voice, "Knight Roger, could it be that someone is trying to sacrifice White Dew City to release the forbidden spell, Eye of Judgment?" "That's right." Roger nodded. "Is it Mr. Sean? Who else could it be?" Roger looked at the hatred in Count Nicholl's eyes and added, "However, Mr. Sean alone would not be able to cause such a huge fire in White Dew City." Count Nicholl's heart sank. His previous conjecture surfaced once again. Although he did not want to believe it, he still asked in a trembling voice, "Is it Earl of Avon who is helping him? What do you think?" Roger asked in return. He did not give Count Nicholl any time to think and asked the same question again. "Count Nicholl, now that the chaos in White Dew City has just settled down, everyone is in a state of panic. We need a noble of virtue and prestige to stabilize the situation. I wonder if you are willing to take on this heavy responsibility." Hearing these words again, Count Nicholl certainly did not think that Knight Roger was crazy like before. He finally believed that Count Angeli was still alive. Moreover, the extinguishing of the fire was most likely his doing. Perhaps he had seen through the plans of the Earl of Avon and Mr. Sean from the very beginning. Thus, he formulated a counterplan and faked his death to turn the tables. Thinking of this, Count Nicholl could not help but feel a chill in his heart. There had never been anyone who could give him as much pressure as Colin Angeli. He was a military genius with unparalleled wisdom. Count Nicholl suddenly felt that compared to this Count of the northern frontier, the young masters of the House of Saint Prospero were as stupid as pigs. From now on, the entire eastern region would be shrouded in the shadow of this Count of the northern frontier. But at the same time, Count Nicholl realized the hidden meaning behind Knight Roger's invitation. For a moment his heart was pounding, and some kind of ambition hidden in the depths of his heart that he did not dare to speak of suddenly surged. But the old and solemn Count Nicholl still took a deep breath to calm the agitation in his heart. "Shouldn't you find a Saint Prospero to take on this responsibility?" The corner of Roger's mouth twitched as he sneered. Is there anyone else in the house of Saint Prospero who can take on this responsibility? Can the citizens of White Dew City continue to trust them? Count Nickel's heart, which had just calmed down, was once again agitated. Although he knew that it was impossible for him to become the Duke of the Eastern region, it was not difficult for him to become the Duke of the Eastern region with the help of Count Angeli. This would definitely bring about an earth-shattering change to the status and strength of the Nickel family. Count Nickel licked his cracked lips and asked in a hopeful and hesitant tone, "What do you mean? Count Angeli, what's your plan?" Knight Roger smiled faintly and put on a matter-of-fact expression. Of course, Count Nickel only wants White Dew City to regain its stability as soon as possible. Don't forget, His Majesty's war order has already been sent. The Eastern region must be ready to send troops as soon as possible. Count Nickel knew that Knight Roger did not fully trust him yet. He also knew that once he accepted the invitation, he would be seen as someone who had sided with the Angeli family. If the situation in the Eastern region changed in the future, he would be very likely to be punished and punished. Thinking of this, Count Nickel's expression changed rapidly as he struggled in his heart. However, Knight Roger was already getting impatient. Seeing this, he urged, "Count Nickel, time is of the essence. If you are not willing, then I'm afraid Count Angeli will have to find someone else." "I'm willing." Count Nickel suddenly raised his head and growled firmly. "Very good." Knight Roger revealed a satisfied smile, then waved his hand and ordered, "Blood cavalry, enter the city." White Dew Castle. In the underground ice cellar, Princess Judy was curled up in Prince Harrison's arms. She did not know whether it was because of fear or the cold, but her petite body could not stop trembling. In fact, this fire did not affect White Dew Castle. After all, no matter how crazy the Earl of Avon was, it was impossible for him to burn down his own castle. However, although there was no fire, it was still in a sea of fire. The scorching air made the people in the castle feel like their lungs were being poured with boiling water every time they took a breath. The scorching temperature also made White Dew Castle feel like it was on top of a steamer. It was unbearably hot. The important people in the castle had been moved to the basement. As for Prince Harrison and Princess Judy, they were arranged to stay in the largest ice cellar. The temperature here was naturally not too affected, and the entrances were covered with wet curtains, so the air was still fresh. However, this still could not alleviate the anxiety and fear of the people in the ice cellar. "Brother, are we going to die?" There were still traces of tears on Princess Judy's face. It seemed like she had just cried. "Don't worry, we definitely won't." Prince Harrison hugged his sister tightly and comforted her with a firm tone. However, he was not sure himself. Princess Judy didn't know if she had heard the insincerity in her brother's words. After a long silence, after a moment of silence, she suddenly asked, "Brother, if we don't escape this disaster, what would be your biggest regret?" Prince Harrison was taken aback by these words. He wanted to comfort his sister that they would definitely be able to escape this disaster, but the words did not come out of his mouth. At the same time, he could not help but think, what would he regret? Not being able to see his father and mother again? Not being able to avenge his teacher? Or had he missed out on the supreme position of the Radiance Empire? After thinking for a while, Prince Harrison realized that the final image in his mind was actually the first time he saw Cathy Savoy. It was a hot summer afternoon. Cathy, who was wearing a blue maid's dress, was timidly following behind Colin. When she saw Prince Harrison's gaze, she immediately returned a respectful and shy smile. It was this smile that struck the heart of Prince Harrison, who had just experienced his first awakening of love. Thinking that he would not be able to see Cathy Savoy again before he died, Prince Harrison felt extremely regretful. However, he immediately rejoiced that Cathy did not come to White Dew City with him. Looking at her silent brother, Princess Judy could not help but tug at his collar. "Brother, why aren't you saying anything?" A hint of panic flashed across Prince Harrison's eyes. Just as he was thinking about how to answer his sister's previous question, he suddenly heard a commotion outside. Soon after, Knight Ivan ran in excitedly and shouted, "My lord! Your Highnesses, the fire has been extinguished. The fire has been extinguished." "Really?" Prince Harrison stood up with Princess Judy in his arms. "Of course it's true. You can come out and see for yourself." "I'll go take a look." Princess Judy immediately broke free from her brother's arms and scurried out like a little rabbit. Prince Harrison hurriedly followed as well. After exiting the ice cellar, they indeed discovered that the fire in the city had miraculously been extinguished. Although the air was still filled with smoke, they could clearly feel that the temperature was rapidly dropping. "Awesome! We're saved! We're saved!" Princess Judy jumped and cheered excitedly. The surrounding nobles and guards were also cheering and rejoicing. Many of them even knelt on the ground devoutly, praising the God of Light. Prince Harrison was so excited that tears welled up in his eyes. In his blurred vision, Prince Harrison seemed to see a familiar figure, Teacher's figure. Just as Prince Harrison thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, he heard his sister exclaim in surprise, "That's right. Teacher! Teacher, you're still alive." As she said that, the little girl ran over and threw herself into Colin's arms. The first glimmer of dawn shone on White Dew Castle, bringing this long night to a close. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.